Welcome to Deep Thoughts, Shallow Plots. My name is Erika, and I like to watch horror movies.
My name is Katy, and I like to overanalyze things. What are we overanalyzing today?
Well, today we are overanalyzing the 1975 classic.
Yeah, summer blockbuster.
Summer blockbuster Steven Spielberg breakout hit, Jaws.
Bum bum.
Ba-bum.
Ba-ba-ba-bum.
Roy Schneider, Robert Shaw, and Richard Dreyfuss vehicle.
All those guys.
Those guys, yeah.
And, like, nobody else.
Kind of no one else.
Kinda
Like,
nobody else.
There's other people in the cast, but, like, let's get real. It's
real.
about these three. Yeah.
3 men on a boat.
Which is really only, like, the second half of the film. It's a 2-hour film.
Yeah.
And the second half is them on the boat.
But that's the part that everybody cares about. Nobody cares about the other parts. Except for the opening, I guess. People talk about the opening a lot.
So just a couple things, right? Because, like, it's interesting that, to me at least, that you agreed to do this movie because, you know, I've been your friend for a very long time. And one of the things that has stayed constant about being Katy's friend is that Katy does not like anything to do with bodies of water.
That is true.
The bigger the body of water, the worse.
And I will say,
Yeah.
the 2 worst parts of this movie,
Yes.
the jump scare count for this movie is 2.
Oh, that's not so bad.
No, but they were both when
In water.
Hooper went under the water. He dived
Yes.
deep down under the water.
Yeah.
I was already just so tense because we were under the water.
Right.
And then jump scares happened. And I was like, oh. I don't mind as much when we just get just like seeing the over the water.
Okay.
No, it's not really the water itself. It's the fact that things could be in the water and you can't tell. So
Yeah.
I don't hate, like, most of the shots in Jaws are like the top of water.
It's true. Yeah.
And so that doesn't really freak me out too much. I mean, I don't love being on it,
Yeah.
but like just seeing it is okay. It's the underwater. Once we get underwater, I freak out because
Right.
there could be giant octopuses coming to
Right.
get me with their tentacles.
Yeah, that's the issue for you, right?
Yeah,
So, but it's
the
very
sea
well known
monsters.
and well documented that there are no octopi in Jaws.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I was like, in the ocean? Oh, yes, there are.
Yes, there are. No.
I have the facts.
In Jaws. In this movie, right?
Yeah, no. And oddly enough, as much as I do not like to see any sort of aquatic monsters, animals, aquatic animals, like they all freak me out. Fish freak me out. Jellyfish freak me out. They all freak me out. Sea anemone? Like, why?
Ooh, yeah. What
why?
is that?
Why
Yeah.
are they moving so much? I don't know. I'm down with sharks.
Sharks are cool?
There's something about sharks
Is
that I
it
just...
because they are... Is it their close relation to dinosaurs for you?
I think maybe.
Yeah.
I think there is something so ancient about them
Yes.
that, like, the vibe, I don't know. I'm just like, there's something going on with you.
Yeah.
I feel like if I touched it, it wouldn't feel like other fish would feel. Like,
Yeah,
I
and the,
like
the
fish
fact
would
that
feel
it lives in
gross.
water is simply a formality.
Yeah. If sharks were walking around on land, I'd be like, fuck yeah, shark.
Yeah, sharks.
I want to pet you. I don't know. They're
You
just
can pet
cute.
sharks,
They're
yeah.
cute. They got their little triangle teeth. They're cute.
Yeah, and there is something so, like, ancient and, like, prehistoric
Yeah.
about them. Basically, you know, as we decided to do this movie for our July episode because it does take place
Fourth
over
of July.
4th of July,
It's
right?
like a big deal.
Also to kind of, you know, like, I guess push Katy because she doesn't usually like movies that have to do with water.
Yeah, I'd never seen Jaws before.
Yeah, and I don't think, I was actually realizing that I had seen it, but never not on cable.
Oh.
I'd always watched it on TV. I was happy to see it again, and I did really thoroughly enjoy it.
No, and it makes sense. It is
Yeah.
it basically invented summer blockbusters.
Right, yeah. So, like, this movie is so iconic in so many different ways, right?
Yeah.
It's so, like, genre bending. It invents this idea of the summer blockbuster. No big spoilers, but because I'm sure you'll get into it in our literary corner. But,
Yeah.
like, it also basically creates the American imagination about what sharks are like,
Yeah.
you know? So it's, like, this huge, iconic movie. It's some people's favorite movie of all time.
Yeah, when I told my mom, normally when I tell my mom what movie we're doing, she's
Yeah.
either like, that sounds scary or gross
Yeah.
or dumb.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
this one she's like, oh, Jaws was one of my favorites.
Right,
I
yeah.
remember watching it when I was 15.
And I think a lot of people, older people, have very specific and special memories attached to Jaws the first time watching it, right?
Yeah.
Especially if they were younger when it came out or, you know, around, like, even after it came out, you know.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people have really special memories attached to this movie, and it's, it's iconic. It's one of Steven Spielberg's first films.
Oh, but
Yeah.
going back to what you were saying about it being genre bending.
Yeah.
Another question I had about why we chose this movie was because as I was watching it, I was kind of like, is this a horror movie?
Is Jaws a horror movie? Yeah.
Or is it like an adventure movie or
Right.
a thriller?
Right.
And like, what's the line between those things? Which I think we've talked about before, that it
A
can be a
little.
hard line.
Yeah, well, and what we have not actually really talked about, at least on mic, is like what exactly is our working definition of horror.
Oh, yeah.
Because I feel like I don't want to be boxed in by labels, But it is like, to me, it's in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah.
Right? So to me, as the, the resident horror connoisseur of this podcast,
Yes.
Jaws is absolutely a horror film. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think so, too.
But of course, I think it is also an action-adventure film, right? And I think that people, like, this is just the way our human brains are kind of set up, is to be able to categorize things and put things into boxes and be like, it's this or that, not both and, right?
Right, yeah.
But I think that, it's interesting because, kind of talking about the genre bendingness of this film, is that, like, it came out in 1975. And so what, to me, it does have, like, we talked about this off mic about how the shark in Jaws kind of acting in a way adjacent to a psycho killer in a slasher film.
Because that was the vibe I got when I was watching. I was like, he's giving psycho killer. There was
Right.
like one moment where on the boat where the lights go out because he like cut through the lights, and I was like, that is such
That's
a psycho killer move,
very
cutting
psycho
the
killer
lights.
vibes, yeah.
Excuse me,
But
Mr. Jaws.
Mr. Jaws, right. So here's the thing. Should we come up with like a name for this shark?
Okay, see, because how I feel about it. Some
Or should
people
we
just
just
call
call
it
him
Bruce.
Right.
Some people call it Bruce. How I feel about it is
Yes.
that Bruce is the actor's name.
Bruce is the mechanical shark. Yeah.
Or
the actor's name.
Yeah, that's how I feel about
That's
it.
fair.
And that the character is just, I mean, in the movie, it's just the shark.
The shark, yeah.
So
like-
I just call him Mr. Jaws.
I like Mr. Jaws or the shark. I like that
Yeah.
for us. Okay, good.
So
just
anyway.
from this point forward, when referring
Yeah.
to the shark, what a lot of people who are, fans of this movie, a lot of people know that the mechanical shark they did name Bruce, which apparently was named after Steven Spielberg's lawyer at the time, which
Ooh.
I love that. Yeah.
Bam.
So the shark, capital
Yeah.
T, capital S, the shark,
Yeah.
or Mr. Jaws. I like
yes,
that. Yeah.
I mean, and that leaves room for his first name to be Bruce.
If
he wishes to tell us that.
Also, do we know if this shark is male?
They always use,
Male pronouns.
but I feel like the only person who could be an authority on that is Hooper. And I don't think he ever has a position to, I don't know how you sex a shark.
Well, and also, like, what's something that we'll definitely be getting into is how incredibly masculine this movie is.
yes.
So, like,
And
yeah,
how some
sure, the
people
shark
want
is a
to
boy.
interpret the shark as either a man,
Yeah.
like a masculine,
Yeah.
like whatever. And there's certainly some phallic imagery on the main cover.
Sure.
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but there's also a lot of scholars will see it as like a primordial female goddess thing and like
Sure.
the vagina dentata thing,
sure,
you
yeah.
know? So like we can talk about that more when we talk about the masculine and the feminine, but like I guess all we can do is go by what the movie says, which is he.
He, right?
Mr. Jaws isn't telling us.
Mixed Jaws.
Mixed Jaws.
Mixed Jaws.
Yes. Non-binary queen. But anyway, Psycho Killer Jaws.
Yeah, we have to remember this movie came out in 1975, the summer of 1975. And we are in like proto-slasher territory, right? So
Right.
Psycho has come out, but Halloween and Black Christmas haven't, which are
Right.
really considered like this trifecta of the early slasher genre. So we're kind of pre-slasher, proto-slasher, if you will. But like that is not to say that this still isn't a horror movie, right?
Yeah.
So to me, it's a horror
Well, right,
movie.
and slashers aren't the only horror movie
Exactly.
anyway.
This is very true, right?
But it is interesting that Jaws has certain slasher like even just going back to the opening scene is the promiscuous woman being the first one to
Right.
get killed.
This is
It's
literally
just like
I took actually very, very few notes for this as we were watching the
Yeah.
film. I took less than a page of notes. But like the first thing I wrote was the whore dies first.
Yeah.
And I was like, it's very slasher way
it's
to
very
do
slasher,
it. Yeah.
very horror,
the
and
fact-
just the way the shark is presented is very like, oh, he's a smarter than average shark.
Yes.
He's quicker. He's bigger, which
He's
is always
deadlier.
the thing
Yeah.
with like, Jason or
Right, yeah, with a psycho
Mike Myers.
killer.
Yeah,
in a
they're
slasher
always like,
film.
there's something, you know, in that he's out for like, just for the kill, the sake of the kill.
Right.
And like, he's after like revenge because this boat keeps antagonizing him. So he has this grudge against this boat, which is very like, not shark, but very
Right.
psycho killer.
Also, the fact that this film does go so far as to kill a child is
And a dog, R.I.P. Tippett.
R.I.P. Tippett.
I don't remember the boy's name, but R.I.P. Tippett the dog.
Yeah. The way that horror films, you know, in so many ways kind of, especially American horror films, sort of like reflect what we're supposed to believe is like morally upright, you know, and that when people go against that moralistic attitude towards what we would probably often refer to or call sin, right?
Yeah.
Is usually what kind of opens the floodgates for like the punishment for that sin.
Right.
And that's really what I see in this film, especially with the mayor who's like,
Yeah.
you know, and just the way that the townsfolk and the mayor who, you know,
like
kind of
choosing capital over safety.
yeah, and like their greed,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Capital S sin, greed.
Yeah. So, just to me,
Yeah.
yes, it is a horror film. But this is like, you know, the beautiful thing about film is that like it's whatever you need from it.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
Yeah.
What were you
and
gonna
I
say?
was just that I saw a few different people started talking about the divinity of Jaws, I guess, which also goes to its sort of like comparisons to Moby Dick, where the whale in Moby Dick is also very much like in the text itself compared to God and like, you know, all of that stuff. But like, I think it was the piece in It Came from the Closet.
Right.
So in the essay from It Came from the Closet, which is just like a horror anthology of essays, we both read the piece by Jen Corrigan called
Corrigan.
3 Men on a Boat.
That's right. Yeah.
Which we might talk about a little bit later.
Sure.
But one line that she had in it that wasn't like totally relevant to the piece that she was doing, but what really stuck out to me was a line where she said, "The sea is both their livelihood and their destruction."
Yep.
Which
Absolutely.
felt very like everyone who dies in this film sort of serves as like sacrifices to the human right to be in the ocean.
Yeah.
Right? Like the like colonization of the ocean.
Yeah.
The people who died to the shark are like the sacrifice that the mayor and the other people of the town are choosing
And the like
to make.
yeah, and like the taking of the resources for this town's livelihood.
Yeah,
yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's like the oceans aren't really like the natural place for humans. It's like the shark's rightful place. Like it's where
Right.
the shark lives, but like humans need to like usurp or I always have a hard time with that word, or conquer this natural space. And that means that humans have to die to make that happen.
I
It's
always
like
said usurp.
usurp. I
But
think
you
that
learn
is-
from reading. So
Yeah, I think it is usurp. I knew when I said it, it sounded wrong. Why do I always got to pronounce things wrong on the pod?
It's okay. It's because you learn from reading. It's okay.
Where everybody, all of our millions of listeners could hear me fuck off.
Absolutely. I totally picked up on kind of this theme of sacrifice, and I can't wait to talk more about that in my
Yeah.
in my music corner.
Ooh.
So we've got some pretty big themes that stick with us throughout this entire
and
film.
since we already brought this one up,
Let's do it.
Let's talk about the greed, the capitalism,
Sure.
the mayor.
Yeah.
Because as much as, you know, this is about the shark and the shark is the monster to fear in this, the antagonist in a lot of people's minds is the mayor.
Mayor Larry Vaughn.
Larry Vaughn.
Yeah.
Mayor Vaughn. Yeah. The first time we see him, he's wearing a really hokey suit with like little anchors.
Yes.
Little anchors on
He
it.
is like, yeah.
And I'm like, oh, so you're telling us right now that you're going to weigh us all down? Dude?
Ooh.
Is that what you're telling us?
To me, he's like, I am putting on the costume to play the role that I need to play.
Yes.
Which is the mayor of this resort town that basically only comes to life in the summer.
Yeah.
Right.
And that, you know, the working class here are all these fishermen and stuff and
Yeah.
these boaters who go out on their boats and use anchors for their job,
Yeah.
you know? And he's like, I'm going to be like one of you guys. I'm going to align myself with you guys, you working class guys. And it's like, Mayor Vaughn, you're not. You're actually aligning yourself with the hotel owner.
Right.
And
the restaurant owners and
Yeah.
the tourism
there's
economy.
a lot of class divide going on
Yeah.
in this movie too, which is definitely seen in like Hooper and Quint. And
Oh my
stuff when we
gosh,
get
very
onto the boat,
much
but,
so.
But also just in the mayor himself and like the divide not just between the like working class and like the business owners and stuff,
Right.
but also between like the people who live grew up on the island.
Oh my gosh,
the locals
yes.
versus the people who moved in later.
There's this huge islander identity,
yeah,
right?
That's like a big deal.
I think it's Chief Brody's wife, Ellen Brody. She's the one who's like, will I ever be an islander?
Yeah, how long do I have to live here to become an islander?
Yeah, and another woman says, never.
Yeah,
you have to have been born here. So it's an interesting kind of a little microcosm of like the in-group, out-group kind of thing, right? Like we're islanders and they take pride in that, right?
Yeah. And that now we have this out-of-towner coming in to be like our sheriff or chief, whatever.
Yeah, he's the chief of police for Amity Island.
They like only just moved in.
Yes, not too long ago. I think the mayor mentions that it's Chief Brady's first summer, right? Which is interesting.
What a first summer, dude.
What a first summer. But it's also like, why? So then, why did they hire a chief of police from the city, right? Because it wasn't that idea he was NYPD, right? And so then
he's from the city,
he quote unquote retired to get away from the city.
I wonder. I mean, I could see that being something that the mayor did to help look good.
Oh,
you know what I mean? Bring in like,
right,
especially to tourists coming in, being like, we don't want just some like local nobodies.
Yeah, local yokel, right? We don't
trust them. But
we
if we have like a city guy who's keeping an eye on everything
with the NYPD, right? Right, because this is something else that was like really interesting about the 70s is that as just an entire decade is that it was like pretty depressed economically, and the crime rate, that is when like crime all over the country, but especially in the big city like New York City, would have been at its highest, right? So I think that's maybe also part of Brody's character. Like maybe he's got, because we definitely also have this theme of trauma.
Yeah.
And I think like Brody's trauma is like probably the shit NYPD officers had to deal with in the 70s, right?
Yeah.
And so he's kind of like trying to get away from that, but then ends up, confronting an even
worse,
larger trauma, right?
Oh, Brody.
So
ineffectual.
But it's interesting because, like, he's the chief of police. Like, shouldn't he be having, like, regular meetings with the mayor?
Well, and
like,
also, like,
why is he just trying to catch the mayor as he's going about doing mayoral things?
I don't know enough about how any government works.
That's fair.
Let alone, like,
small,
because they also have, like, so many things that they need committee approval for that the mayor can't do
Who's
on
on
his
this
own.
committee? Yeah.
And it seems to be a bunch of, like business owners.
Okay, yeah.
Seem to be, I don't know, when we had the little... Because we have the scene that's like the town hall meeting
or
whatever.
Right.
I don't know who the fuck those people are, but it was like the mayor and his... You know what's interesting? Fun fact from the book.
Oh, yeah?
The mayor has mob ties.
I love that.
And that's why he doesn't want to close down the beaches, because the mob doesn't want him to, because they bought a bunch of real estate.
Yes.
So.
Yes. Well,
so there's that.
So just in general, whether it's that version from the book or from the film, it's like the mayor is just like a pretty glaringly obvious symbol for like capitalist greed, right?
Yeah.
That like...
And not caring who gets hurt.
Right. That like...
It's all for profit.
Yes, it is profit over people.
Yeah.
And
which is then becomes funny because, like, if you would just take care of people, you wouldn't have to do things like pay $10,000 to kill one shark.
Yeah, and pretend it's the shark when it's just a shark.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, God, that part. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just like so often.
Right, because
they do these dumb things and then they have to pay money to fix the things.
Because the mayor does kind of set up the stakes, right? He's talking to Brody and he's just like, basically the money that this town makes in the summer keeps the people off food stamps in the winter.
Yeah, like they do need that. That is their livelihood. That is how tourist towns work.
Yes. Okay, fair. However, like, it's the 70s. It's a rough economy anyway. And, like... I understand that, like, for a lot of people, especially, like, in mid-century, like, in the 70s, like, that there is this idea that, like, welfare is just, like, being on welfare is, like, one of the worst things you could do, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But, like, it's not their fault that there's, like, a crazy psycho killer shark that they had to shut down for the summer and didn't make as much money and, like, just... Freaking take the food stamps for a winter.
If you talk to the people who would actually be affected, because I don't think the mayor would actually be that affected other than in re-election terms.
Right.
But all the business owners and stuff that he's, making these decisions to placate. Yes. Like, if you actually talk to the people who would end up affected by this and, like, on welfare or whatever, they'd be like, no, we'd rather not die.
I would rather not have my kids die. Yeah,
because we actually
or my neighbors or whatever.
Because, there's the really powerful scene with Mrs. Kittner where she slaps Brody.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, you knew.
Yeah.
You fucked up.
Yeah.
Basically. Which is like, yeah, all of the people with money and businesses are making their calculations and they're like, it's more important to keep the beach open.
Right.
But all the people who don't know, I think,
Yeah.
would make different calculations, but they don't have the power to make those decisions.
Yeah. And
Which ain't that the way.
yeah, and yeah, the mayor is kind of making an assumption that's like, oh, well, they would rather like
Yeah.
us like put their safety at risk than have them receive welfare. And she's like,
Yeah.
why don't you let them make that choice though?
Like
'cause-
I feel like if they talked to Mrs. Kittner beforehand and she was like, oh, there's a fucking shark?
yeah,
Okay, let's just stay off the beaches then.
yeah,
Like, easy decision.
It is. It's an interesting.
It's that sacrifice.
Yeah, it is such a sacrifice, and like, it's reminding me a lot of. Are you familiar with Igor Stravinsky's Rite of Spring?
Vaguely.
Vaguely, yeah.
Not as you are, I'm sure.
No. So yeah, it honestly, as I was like doing my research for the music corner and learning, kind of looking into this like minor second motif, right?
Mm-hmm.
That like it also, the same minor second interval kind of motif shows up a lot in Stravinsky's Rite of Spring, which is about like a pagan sacrifice.
I was going to say it sounds pagan.
Yeah,
Rite of Spring sounds pagan.
A pagan sacrifice for like a good harvest, and like they pick a young
this is what they're
virginal
doing.
maiden to dance herself to
Instead
death.
of a good harvest, it's like a good tourist
A
season.
good tourist season, yeah, to make
Yeah.
it through the winter. It's all about making it through the winter.
Right. It always
right,
is about
yeah.
making it through the winter. Yeah, because there's even the line, one of the business, during the town hall, there is a lady who's a business owner, a restaurant owner, or a hotel owner or something. When the mayor's like, okay, we'll shut it down for one day. We'll do it. We'll shut down the beach for a day. And she's like, a day? That's like 3 weeks or something. It's like I don't
or
remember
is
the
it just a day?
Yeah, but the idea that like for them, each day of summer is so important because they pack in all of their earnings in just these 3 months.
Yeah.
You know? That like, one day is like 3 weeks.
Yeah.
One summer day is like 3 autumn weeks or
Right.
something. Like,
Yeah.
there's a reason for that calculation, but also the priorities.
Yeah, the priorities are strange, right? And just very...
Yeah, because, like, the mayor gets more concerned about the vandalism on the, like, Welcome to Amity sign.
Yeah,
than
he
is
wants
about,
everything to look good.
Yeah, he cares about the
Right.
appearance.
Yeah, the optics rather
Yeah.
than, like, what's actually happening. What's happening, dare I say, under the surface, right? Which is where the shark is.
I know, and just, like, the extent he goes to, where it's like, okay, they know the shark killed, he calls it injured some bathers. Which is, like, what a way to say it. The shark killed people, but okay, injured some bathers.
Yeah.
He gets the coroner to change the report to a boat accident. Oh, yeah. Which is
So shady. Yeah.
so fucking shady.
Yeah.
And Brody, you should have at least stood up. Like, that's I don't know, Brody. I would have done something.
Yeah.
Brody doesn't do things, though.
No, and I wonder if that's because, again, like, he is technically kind of the new guy.
Yeah,
and, like,
that he
he's
doesn't
the
really
police
know-
chief, but he's not really quite...
Yeah, like, where he fits in the hierarchy yet.
or quite ingrained in the
And he
community
seems like
yet.
somebody who cares about hierarchy, and probably in NYC, like
He's
in the
a
NYPD,
cop, yeah.
he knew his place
Yeah.
in the hierarchy and like what he was expected of him.
Yeah.
But now he's like in this weird position of power, but not full power. He can't even shut down the beach.
No, or he tries to, and then the mayor says, no, you
Yeah.
can't. Yeah.
And he's like, what? And then he was like, yeah, you need a committee approval. And it's like, what?
What? Yeah.
For public safety, I need committee
So then,
approval?
so I don't understand why he couldn't just, like, call a committee meeting and be like, hey, guys, here's the facts,
Yeah,
you know?
but try doing that during COVID.
Okay.
I'm just saying, there are certain parallels to trying to close down areas.
Oh,
such
right.
as businesses.
Oh,
And
right.
being like, oh,
or
but,
public spaces. Yes, yeah.
People in government being like, oh,
I don't
but think
know.
about the money, though.
Yeah, it's
What
like,
if with the money?
But what about the people who get sick and some
I'm sure
that
a
will
lot
die?
of people made jokes about the mayor
Don't worry about
during COVID's height. But anyway,
Yeah.
even before the mayor shuts down the beach,
Yeah.
what's really wild to me is that he has all these people out at the beach.
Yes.
There they are. They're out at the beach.
Yes,
But
they're
they're like,
there.
aren't enough people in the water.
They're not
for
going in the
him to
water,
be
though.
Satisfied?
Yes, it's not good enough for him.
And so he, like, starts, like, pushing
Who
people.
is he telling? Because there's that family, right?
Yeah.
That he's
Just
like...
more locals?
And who... Or are they, like, business owners or on this committee or some
I
shit,
don't know.
you know?
Or if they are just sort of local... Are they tourists? I don't know.
Yeah. So he asks them to get in the water. Yeah, and like they
And
do.
they eventually do, yeah.
But they look like pretty concerned about it.
Yeah,
like
'cause
as
they
they
all
get in
kinda
the
know
water,
at
they're
this
like,
point.
oh
They're
boy.
like-
And then it's interesting, like the way that one family does end up getting in the water, and then like everybody follows their lead.
Yeah.
Which is what makes me think that family, and again, maybe if I'd paid closer attention, like that family is like an important family on the island,
Yeah.
right? They're like, oh well, if
Like socially important.
socially important, yeah, like maybe they own one of the hotels or one of the
Yeah.
restaurants or something, right?
And yeah, they're the family that needs to go in so that Mrs. Kittner can feel okay sending her
Sending
son
her
back
son
in.
in, yeah. Exactly.
Even though she didn't want to.
Yeah.
But she did it. Yeah. No, and then the way that they start to see, it's just the little kid's prank. You
I
know,
love it.
That, yeah.
Yeah.
That how, like, people freak out so much that they start, like, stampeding each other.
Right.
Trying to get out.
Yeah.
And, like, hurting each other. Like, almost drowning people.
Yeah.
And it's just like, Mayor.
Like, get your act
caused
together,
this.
dude. Yeah.
But no, the mayor has his own kids there.
Oh, he
Which is great.
does?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Well, because he finally, he like has a little talk with the chief afterwards where he's like, okay, I get it. I'm going to sign the voucher to hire the guy to kill the shark.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And he mentions like, because my kids were there. My kids were there.
My kids, yeah.
And it's like, yeah, and so were the chief's kids.
Yeah.
I'm like, why would you bring your kids?
Because
like,
once it's,
like,
yeah.
even when the chief is like, hey, take your boat over there, which ends up being the bad idea because the shark ends up over there.
Yeah.
But, like, even if the shark didn't end up over there, you still took your kids to the beach where you know there may be a shark
That's it,
attack.
yeah.
You want your kids to see a traumatic shark attack?
Yeah, right?
Like, what's your best case scenario?
Yeah, and it's always so interesting when, like, yeah, people, like government officials or, you know, anyone in a film like this who represents something bigger, like greed or, you know, rampant out of control capitalism or something, right? It's like, yeah, they start to, like, see the light when it actually starts to impact them personally,
'cause for so
right?
long it doesn't impact
Even
them
though
personally.
he's the mayor of this town,
Yeah.
right? And, like, so wouldn't all of this be personal for him? No.
Who cares if a couple, like, tourists or locals or whoever,
Yeah.
these dumb kids
Yeah.
out skinny dipping, who
Yeah.
cares if they die? The businesses matter more. And then it's like, oh, wait, but my kids
But my kids
my
actually
my
matter.
own kids?
Yeah.
And even when he's like, oh, but my kids were there, he still is like, plus we got to get this place back open by August.
Right, yeah,
He
yeah.
still is like, thinking about it.
Yeah.
That,
But honestly, he's only in the first half of the movie, and then we never have to see him again,
that's true.
which is good because he's pretty annoying. he's definitely
Dumb little suits.
yeah, well, yeah, he's definitely trying to, like, I would use the term peacock, right? He's like got the fancy, flashy clothes on.
It's like, you're just a mayor.
Yeah,
You're a mayor.
of a small resort town.
Like, where are you trying to go?
In
with?
New
like,
York.
Okay, big man. I don't know. I do wonder if that's also part of Brody's move, is just sort of like he got tired of being just the small, very ineffectual fish in a big pond, and he wanted to go be the big fish.
The big fish in the small pond. Oh,
there was a bigger fish.
A bigger fish. Oh my goodness.
You know, and I wonder if that I get the vibes from the mayor too, where he's like really set on being this big fish in this small pond, and it's like this is his kingdom.
Yeah.
He just has those vibes of being very power hungry, and it's like power hungry over this.
Yeah, over
Dude.
a resort town.
Like okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, you worry about that vandalism. But yes, we're done with the mayor. Enough about that
that
bitch.
guy, yeah.
The one thing that Brody is able to do, even with the mayor's interference,
Right.
is he does get in somebody. He calls the I can't say that word. Oceanographic Institute,
That. Yep.
and gets Hooper in.
Yeah, because what is his name? Matt Hooper?
I wrote it down.
I wrote it down.
just wrote
I
it
wrote it
down.
down. Matt Hooper. Yep.
Okay.
Because Matt Hooper is I'm
Young hotshot scientist.
Yeah, so he is a oceanographer
Yeah.
/ marine
Ichthyologist.
biologist / ichthyologist.
Yeah, something in those vibes.
Is an ichthyologist someone who studies sharks? Fish.
Yeah.
Of which sharks are fish.
Of which sharks are fish. Yeah.
Okay, love that.
I feel like in 1975, I'm not sure that there would have been, just based on the research I did about
Sure,
how sharks,
that there
how
would have been
Josh
much of
changed
a-
it. I'm not sure that there were a lot of people who were like specialized in sharks.
That they were differentiating between,
Yeah.
or honestly between like an oceanographer and a marine
Yeah.
biologist.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure an expert in this field would be like, well, actually.
Yeah.
But I just know that like sharks, like the field of studying sharks is like very small. And a lot of it was originally people who were just sort of like choosing on their own rather than it being something that's like institutionally backed. Which
Yeah.
seems to be Hooper's case, where he talks about how it's like, well, I had to buy all of my own equipment
Right.
because I come from a rich family.
Yes, he does. Yes.
Because class.
Class, yes. But it's interesting because he doesn't present himself as a way that Hooper
Yeah.
doesn't present himself in a way that he like comes from money, right? I think I heard it on some other podcast that he kind of, his look is sort of like the OG hipster.
He does have a hipster
Right?
look.
He's got the beard, he's got the beanie cap, you know.
Yeah. It's very like beachside hippie.
Yeah.
Like, or like Maine hippie.
Yeah.
Maine hippie.
Yeah.
If hippies
Northeast.
Yeah. It's like that kind of look.
Yeah. Yeah, so he comes in as like our like kind of
Our scholar.
the scholar, yeah, of like understanding exactly what's happening. And he does have a lot of very helpful information,
He does.
right? Like he knows that the shark that they catch, that the town and the mayor are trying to pass off as the shark.
Yeah,
He's like, this is
he's
a tiger
immediately
shark.
Like, that bite radius.
It ain't right, yeah.
And all the other people are like, the bite what?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What's that word? Suddenly I don't understand words. Oh,
So it's interesting that he's our scholar for
Yeah.
sure, and like he does come with this information that people don't really have, and like it's so interesting because this movie is from the 70s that like Chief Brody doesn't know fuck all about sharks
yeah.
either.
I love all the scenes where he's like flipping through the book being like, oh, that's a shark too.
Yep.
Oh, another shark.
So he busts open the family set of encyclopedias.
Like you read up.
Yeah,
You
read
do
up.
it, Chief.
And I was like, oh, wow.
I love that for
Yeah.
him. I love him trying.
Yes. So yeah, it's just sort of an interesting way of like this film shows like accessing knowledge, right? Like the thing is that they don't know much about the shark. They just know that there is one, right?
Yeah. And it's
And they don't have, the internet, right? And
Yeah.
like
you have to call up an expert from the Ocean Institute.
an oceanographer / marine biologist /
Yeah.
ichthyologist.
The shark guy.
Yeah. The
Send
original
over their one
multi-hyphenate,
shark
yeah.
guy. Yeah. Good old Matt Hooper.
But it's interesting because, I think also what we've kind of been talking about a little bit is that, like, there's a really big theme of, like, man versus nature in this film.
yeah,
and there's actually been a theme of man versus nature in, like, the past few films that we've covered.
Yeah.
And I don't know, once we record, I kind of forget. But, like, what have we said about, I don't know, like, what is there to say about man versus nature? Like, why are we so obsessed with it? And
It is such a
yeah.
a primeval. That's apparently my word for today.
I love it.
Primeval. I've used it a few times, but it is
I
like
love
such a primeval. Like, because they always talk about how to, like, when you take a beginning writer's class, you always talk about conflict and, like, the basic conflicts to set up. And there's,
Right.
like, man versus man,
Yes.
man versus God,
Right.
man versus nature.
Yeah.
Is always, like, one of the first ones you hear about, because that's always just such, because, I mean, when we, like, from prehistory, just fucking cavemen having to learn how to fucking light a fire. You know? It's like the first conflict of the world.
It's true, yeah. And like truly for so long human beings, especially humans in like that we would consider, I'm using like really heavy quotes here, civilized.
Oh, yeah.
Right? The whole idea is to like be able to have control over nature.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, the whole idea of going out and claiming land and
Yes.
to make that land yours and to like build a little cabin on it.
Yeah, and like to keep nature at bay, like to keep the plants the way you want them,
Yes,
right?
which
Rather
is all
than
a very like Western understanding
Very,
of
yeah.
it, because instead of like living with nature
Yeah.
and being a part of nature, because humans are animals,
Yeah.
we are natural. It's always about like controlling it, overpowering it.
So yeah, it's
conquering
just
it.
like it's just an evergreen conflict
you
that
gotta
will
go
just
back.
that well will never run dry,
Yeah.
right? And like here it is again, right? With
Yeah.
like this the ocean and like this symbol, the shark being like the symbol of the ocean and the ocean
ocean's
ecosystem
wrath.
and wrath, yeah, of like
That's the thing about nature. It can be beautiful and wonderful and welcoming and like plentiful, and like they get their livelihood
Yeah.
from the ocean, from their fishermen,
Yeah.
and like all of that. But it's also like nature can turn on a fucking dime.
yeah, it
and
could
fuck
be
you up.
incredibly unforgiving.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Like you said, it's all about getting through the winter.
yeah. So yeah, it's just kind of interesting. I just noticed that had been coming up for us a lot. Like that came up for us when we like did The Descent.
Oh yeah, and it would have been better if they just stuck with it, but they brought in some.
Then they had to make something else happen with it. There's
Yeah.
a little bit of a nature conflict happening in Bodies because the hurricane that's happening outside.
Honestly, even in The Thing, because
Right.
they also are dealing with like
The cold.
and how they're in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, kind of this uninhabitable land that
Yeah.
they're doing their damnedest to inhabit. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. It has been coming up a lot.
Yeah, and like this,
and
yeah.
fucking, it's literally what The Hallow was about.
Exactly.
It was literally man versus nature.
Yes, yeah.
And
Yeah.
man trying to take all the trees down. Yeah. And that's very much another thing that the mayor represents is this desire to like control nature.
Yeah.
And make it work for you instead of working with it or something.
Yeah.
And, like, that's such a problem. I am, like, such an expert on shark conservation now.
Okay.
I watched a few YouTube videos.
Wow.
But, like, that's such a problem with why our oceans are so fucked.
Oh my God.
It's because for the longest time, people were sort of saw fish as, like, a renewable resource because the ocean just seems so vast and big.
Right.
It was like, who cares if you fish? You
Yeah.
take some fish.
Yeah.
Like, they'll just come back.
Yeah.
Without knowing, like, anything about how long these fish, like, what their life cycle is.
Yeah.
How long it will take for the population to regrow. Like, all of these things where it's like, we're just trying to take and take from nature.
Right. And how far, if like I'm thinking about salmon, like go like into the ocean.
Yeah.
And then come back to like their
Yeah.
freshwater river, right? And how like the other things that we're doing to the environment impact the environment of water bodies that
Yeah.
then make it harder for fish to reproduce
So it's always funny when you have the man versus nature. It's like, it'll be better for everybody if nature wins. Because when man wins, they
Yeah.
fuck up nature, which then fucks up man. Because
Yeah.
then we run out of food.
Yeah.
It's like you need to find the way to work with nature, not against it. But not this shark, because this shark is a psycho killer.
right.
But
Yeah,
it is kind of an interesting thing where this movie allows us to be like, have our wrath against nature and all the horrible things that nature can be, and like have this like easy outlet to like vent that anger against nature without like while feeling good about it. You can kill a shark and feel good about it because sharks are just evil killers.
right. Mindless.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the way you can't when you like hunt a deer or something.
With dead eyes.
Yeah.
Like a doll's eyes. Which I think is probably my favorite quote.
Yeah.
Just that entire, okay, I know we're going to talk about it, but like that entire basically like
Oh, yeah.
monologue that
Yeah.
Quint gives is like, it's so iconic
Yeah.
and
yeah.
it's so good. Yeah.
No, and I do think it's interesting that talking back about Hooper,
Yeah.
and like where this knowledge base comes from. It's interesting that both Hooper and Quint, who are like our shark experts, though they're
Right.
coming from like Hooper's coming from this very like scientific, rational way, and I've
Yeah.
heard a lot of people
Logic.
talk about
Yeah.
Quint coming from this more like instinctual place, but like they're both also coming from shark attacks.
Yes.
Like Hooper also first got fascinated by sharks when a shark attacked one of his boats,
Right.
and he had to swim to shore. And that made him love sharks. And, like, honestly,
Yeah.
I kind of get that
Yeah.
in a weird way.
Sort of like a fascination.
Yeah.
Right. For sure. Yeah.
And there's also, I mean, again, it kind of goes back to that, like, fate sacrifice stuff where it's like, are these two men, was Quint meant to die to sharks? Like was that meant to be his death? Is he
Yeah.
fated to die of sharks and then
Yeah.
he ends up dying of sharks? And,
Yes.
like, is Hooper fated to survive sharks?
Huh.
You know what I mean?
Interesting. Yeah.
Interestingly, Hooper dies in the book.
Hooper dies in the book.
Yeah.
Fast. I've never.
He
So have
dies
you
when
read the entire book, or did you just read a synopsis?
No,
Yeah.
I read a few snatches of parts
Okay.
that seemed interesting, but
Yeah.
just reading the synopsis, I was like, oh, they made a lot of, that doesn't sound good. I don't like some of these choices.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I might, I'll put in little tidbits here and there that are relevant and interesting. But yeah, no, apparently Hooper even was originally planned to die in the movie.
Okay.
During the part where the shark attacks the
Yes.
cage.
Oh yeah.
That's where he dies in the book.
Yeah.
But I guess they had some real footage of a shark attacking a scuba diver in the cage.
Okay.
And the scuba diver swam away.
Oh.
And they really want to use that footage
Yes.
for the attack. So they're like, I guess Hooper swims away.
Hooper lives. Ooh.
Yeah. So they talk
Yeah.
about like that shark like saving Hooper's life.
Yeah.
In a weird way. But I don't know. It's just weird things about like sacrifice and fate and like the weird divinity of the shark and choosing who lives and who dies.
Right.
Like, why did Quint survive that just to die to this shark later?
Right.
And, like, the Moby Dick of it all.
So I gotta tell you, like, Quint is my favorite character in this film.
yeah.
Does anyone have a favorite character in this film that's not Quint? Like,
I can see people liking Hooper because he's kind of, like, I could see young people watching it being like, Hooper's the young hot scientist guy.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So yeah, I could see people like, and I do think Hooper has, I mean, he has some of the good lines. We don't have a fool in this. There just aren't enough people.
No.
I feel like if we did have more people, Hooper could somehow do double duty as like fool and scientist, which is a weird
scholar,
combo.
a foolish scholar.
Yeah, which is a
Ooh.
weird combo, but like,
Right.
there's something about him being a rich kid
Yes.
and like him sort of like not like with all of his knowledge, he sort of is ignorant about so much of the real world.
Yes.
And he just kind of is like, I know things. But like when he's actually out there on the boat, he's like, I don't think that's a shark. I think it's a game fish or something. Like he makes all these assumptions.
Yeah.
And each time it's like, no, it's the shark.
Shark, yeah.
You
It's
don't
sort of
actually
like,
know what you're,
I think like the way he like reflects Quint is like, it's basically like the difference between book smart and being street smart.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like Hooper is very book smart.
Yeah.
He's the one who probably works for the Oceanographer Society. He's the one who went to like college for this. Like, do you think Quint went to college?
God, no. I mean, he went to the army.
He was in the army. He served in World War II,
Yeah,
right?
that's what he did.
And so Quint is just a little bit more, I would say,
it
street
gives him
smart.
this like confidence that is like so unearned, except for maybe it is because he kind of does end up being right. Like when each time he dives under the water, he's like, yeah, I'll be fine. Don't worry about it. Like when he goes to check out the hull of that boat that was my first fucking jump scare. The fucking head through
That was scary.
Yeah. I hate it. I mean, I was already upset because he was under the water.
Yeah.
And then it was worse.
Yeah.
But anyway, he was like, no, it's fine. I'm just going to dive down. Don't worry about it. It's just, I'm the most aware of what the shark is capable of. And like how big it is and like what could happen to me. And I know I'll be fine.
Yeah.
It's like a weird confidence that he has that's like unwarranted, except for each time he interacts with the shark. He's fine.
He's fine.
So I guess he's
That's
right.
true.
Like, it's weird.
He's got a couple of close calls for sure, but overall, he's fine. He does survive at the end of the film. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like for a while he could be dead. We don't know. And then he comes back
well,
up.
because he's kind of MIA for a while. Yeah. And they're like, am I supposed to believe he's still underwater? Well, he had like oxygen.
Yeah.
Maybe. Okay, maybe. Sure.
And he was just like, I'm going to sit this out. See what Quint and Brody do.
I'm going to head out. Yeah.
Really, what was he doing underwater? It's like, I'm just going to ponder for a while. This seems like a good meditation spot. Uber. Oh, God. The other thing from the book is that Brody's wife, Ellen, used to date Hooper's older brother, who was a rich kid in the town.
Of course.
And then when Hooper comes to town, they have an affair.
Oh, my God.
Which is very much cut.
Yes.
So I guess some people argue that there are vibes during the like dinner scene when he shows up with the wine. That like maybe Hooper and Ellen are like, or Ellen's kind of into him.
Oh.
Because he's talking about all his fish stuff.
That's not how I read it.
I never got that vibe. I can see, like thinking back, I'm like, oh, okay, I see why some people think that maybe there's like, she's maybe interested because it's like, ooh, this young cool guy.
Yeah.
But it wasn't giving potential affair.
No. I thought he was just there to win over Chief Brody.
Yeah, I mean, he showed up for Brody.
Yeah.
You know, but they have to have the woman in there to be like, it's not gay though.
But
don't worry about it, it's not gay. He just brought a bottle of wine for his man friend.
Yeah. Which then Chief Brody begins to effectively chug. Like, but he gets a glass of wine. He doesn't even get a wine glass. Not that it matters, right?
But
like he's got this glass, and he just pours it all the way up and just starts chugging it. It's interesting. So
how Hooper interacts with the locals or not just the locals. I'm counting Brody and his wife, I guess. But like Hooper's. Yeah, just his confidence in general. He's like, here I am showing up unannounced with this nice bottle of wine. I'm here to talk to your husband. Yeah. Let me in. Yeah. I'll eat some of your dinner. Yeah. Like, he just sort of barges in and does things.
He does, because what isn't Chief Brody not eating his dinner?
Yeah, he's like not eating his dinner.
He's not eating,
because he's got his head all hunched in his hand, and his son is mocking his...
Yes.
It's just a really cute scene, honestly.
And I think he probably is feeling, like, so defeated and like,
right after
stuck.
Mrs. Kittner slapped him, so he's feeling guilty.
I'm sure he feels awful, and like, he feels like he should do something, but maybe he doesn't
know what to do.
Doesn't feel like he can, right? And so he's like, nope, not hungry, only alcohol.
And Hooper's like, more for me.
Yeah, like,
num, num, num.
alcohol for you, food
eating
for me.
Brody's dinner.
Yes.
Next gonna sleep with his wife. No, it's interesting. Yeah, no, in the book, Peter Benchley, who wrote it, he originally had just like a nice modest sex scene between Brody and his wife. And the like editor was like, in this horror thriller book, we can't have normal marital sex. We gotta have something illicit.
Illicit. We gotta have an affair.
So, like,
yeah.
Yeah, and I guess, when they made the movie, they were like, or not. We could just not have
Just
an affair.
not,
That
yeah.
doesn't seem... Yeah. But
The movie's already 2 hours long.
Yeah. No, they
We
cut
don't
out
need
a
more.
lot of subplots with the people that were...
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the back half
Yeah.
in the book is only the back third. You know?
Okay.
And I think Spielberg was the one who originally really was like, I would love to direct this movie, but only if that final boat scene is like most of the movie.
Of it. Yeah. Yeah.
So they cut,
Which
but,
I get.
But
Yeah.
Anyway, back to Hooper. Hooper and Brody, they're interesting. They have vibes. Hooper and Quint also have interesting vibes.
Yes, they do.
Because once again, it's that class divide. It's not just the like street smarts, and
Book smarts, yeah.
it's also just sort of like him talking about your hands have never been used for anything but counting money.
Yes.
And then Hooper's like, I have time for this working class hero crap.
Yes.
And it's like, it's because they're both experts in this field, but they don't want to like take the time to listen to each other's.
Or admit that the other maybe has knowledge that the other could benefit from.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. To help them work together because that is what they're really supposed to be doing.
And for the longest time, like, they have these different things that they could be combining to good effect, probably, but they don't actually start working together until, like, the boat's already sinking and, like, shit's already going really bad, where they're finally like, oh, we have knowledge that together is greater than the sum of its parts.
Yes.
We could combine these different things that we have. Like, it takes them so long to figure out that they can work together.
Yeah, but they don't want to listen to each other. They don't want to listen to what the other person has to say.
And they don't want to listen to Brody because Brody doesn't know shit.
Yeah.
Even though he's supposed to be kind of like the in-between.
I guess.
He's too kind of ineffectual to be much of an in-between between them.
It's true, yeah.
So it takes them a long time until that infamous scar scene, which we'll talk about
Oh,
more.
I love that scene so much, yeah.
I don't know. I think it'd be easy to talk about how a lot of people in this film have maybe, like, the wrong motives. Like, the mayor has, like, really wonky motives.
Yeah, and, like,
you know,
the
even Quint is like, I'll do it for 10,000. Like, they're like, we'll give you 3,000. And he's like, 10,000. So he's also kind of like, and also like his weird vengeance thing. That's like, he's only in it to kill the shark, not to save lives or something.
Yeah.
Which I guess would be better to save lives. I don't know. Like, we have Chief Brody. But then it's like, Hooper is coming in, and he's like, one of the first things he wants to do is have Brody stand precariously at the edge of the boat so that he can get a picture of the shark with, like, Brody standing there for scale.
For scale, yes.
Yeah, he's like, I don't care if Brody dies right now. I need this good shot.
Banana for scale, yes.
Yeah. Brody for scale. Yeah, so, like, Hooper's priorities, his motives aren't great either, which is, because, he's coming at it from, like, too scientific a place, where he's like, I need all of the information about this shark, and that's what matters, is getting the information.
Yeah.
It's, like, kind of just as weird as doing it just for money or something.
Yeah.
Which I guess is why Brody has to be the one that finally succeeds, and not anybody else.
That's true. Brody is the one who does it. Right. Yes, you're right. Yeah.
Should we move on to talking more about, like, masculinity and Brody in particular?
Right. Yeah, because I see these three men, right, because really we effectively have three characters in this film, right?
Yeah, like we said.
That
not a single person of color.
Well, Katie, I think you're expecting too
women
much.
From the 70s.
Yeah, I think you're expecting too much.
I've seen Jesus Christ Superstar. I know there were people of color back then.
What? Well,
I think that's a 70s movie. I'm actually not sure. It might be an early 80s.
Whatever it's worth, there's quite a few Jewish people in this film. I don't know.
Okay.
Anyway.
But anyway, it's just these three white guys.
We've got these three dudes, right? And
I
I feel like, to me, all three of them represent, like, a different aspect of masculinity.
And I think it's
right?
because they're kind of supposed to be, like, I mean, Brody in particular, but in general, they're supposed to be, like, everymen.
Yeah.
That, like, anybody could, like, project onto.
Yes.
Because the viewing public is always considered to be, like, white men, which is what I was getting at by saying that they're not. I had a point I was getting at, which is that, like, these men are meant to represent, like, anybody.
Yeah.
Anybody could take down this shark. One person could make a difference.
The idea is that, like, I think for a long time, you know, people in Hollywood have held on to the belief that anyone will go see a movie about a man.
Yeah.
Specifically a white man, right?
Yeah.
But only women
will go see movies.
Yeah, only women will go see movies about women, right? Well, the thought is there, but I think it's been pretty well understood that that's not necessarily
I guess the only
the
thing
case.
is that the men who care about only seeing a movie about men will make a big stink anytime that there's a movie about women out.
Yeah.
And like their outrage will overpower the fact that a lot of people went and saw, you know, Captain Marvel or
or like
Black Panther or whatever.
How actually well, like how successful economically the film was, like how much money it made,
What
especially its
matters
opening
most
weekend.
is that
Yeah.
there was a bunch of hullabaloo on the internet about.
So
yeah.
you're totally right. So we've got,
no, yeah.
but to me, all three of these men represent a different aspect of masculinity. So like to me,
more on this.
Brody represents, he's definitely like the authoritarian,
Yeah.
right? Because he's a cop, right?
Yeah, and yet a very powerless, ineffectual one.
Truly, but like he is representing law enforcement in a way, and he's also representing fatherhood, right? He has a son.
Yeah,
like he's kind of representing the father-son aspect of masculinity, the way that so many, you know, men understand their first understanding of masculinity, and the way
is looking to their father.
like the way that their dad does
their
it, right?
absent father. And
Exactly, yeah. So he's the dad, right? You know, that paternalistic figure, if you will.
Is he our... No.
Of which
I was going to say, is he our first sad dad? I've been waiting for a sad dad, but his own kid doesn't die. It's somebody else's
No, his kid doesn't die. We can get ourselves a sad
We'll get
dad
a sad
movie.
dad.
We'll get it in there.
But I need it to come to me naturally. Otherwise,
Okay.
it won't feel right.
Okay, we'll figure it out. Anyway,
We'll find a sad dad.
I mean, he's I think maybe like in crisis at least, but
Yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily call him a sad dad. And then we've got
Though, I mean, that great... What we already talked about, him looking all guilty, head in his hands, and then his son copying the guilty head in his hands is such a primo sad dad move.
Yeah.
That's great. I loved that imagery.
So he's kind of bringing that up, right? But then Hooper, he's also kind of like this idea of masculinity and manliness and being a man as like being able to understand things logically and with reason without emotion getting into it. That's very Hooper, right?
Yeah, and I also feel like despite his rich background, he has a sort of vibe of like the self-made man, even though he's not self-made. He's not self-made.
Yeah.
But like just in terms of like he went to school and he learned all of this knowledge himself.
Yeah.
And like, you know, all of this equipment is his own. Where it's like he's very in control of his own sphere.
Yeah.
Like he's completely in control of his life in this way that like I think is a type of masculinity that people really idolize, of like no man is an island, but they sure do wish they were sometimes.
Yeah,
you know,
right.
like they want to be in complete control of themselves.
Yeah, well, and also I think that does kind of maybe parallel the shark a little bit, right? This kind of like emotionless, just like the way the shark is like this.
You're gonna be like, Jaws is a self-made man.
Jaws is a self-made man. No.
He killed those people himself.
I'm just thinking
shit from his dad.
Again, I'm just thinking about like
no, I get what
the
you're
way,
saying.
like just thinking about when I teach about like understanding gender in my health class, right? It's like, you know, the way that there's still to this day like awful stereotypes perpetrated about how like women react with their feelings,
with their
you know,
emotional gender,
and like you can't trust emotion.
I did have this moment,
yeah,
maybe I'll touch on it a little bit later, but I did have this thought for a while that maybe my literary corner was just going to be about the symbology of water. You know? And there is something about water in particular that's almost always like a feminine aspect, a feminine energy. There's a lot of like water goddesses, you know, like, and like water sea serpents.
I think about the tarot suit cups.
Yeah, cups are which is also the cup of emotions. And like still waters run deep and like all of those sort of like kind of flowy feminine vibes that are all emotional and stuff. And here comes Hooper and all of his fancy equipment that he bought to like
with his logic and scientific
to
reason,
be like on
and
top of that water,
Yeah.
and like not worry about going into it because he's just here as like an observer. And he's not going to get emotional or whatever. And he never does get emotional, even when people are like fucking dying.
Yeah. She's like, okay.
He's like, okay, cool. Yeah. Brody, just stand over there.
Yeah.
You'll be fine.
Brody for scale. So then that leaves Quint, who is like, well, you know, and I think it's super important to put this into a historical perspective, which I think we have been. But like Quint, like the fact is, again, 1975.
Yes.
World War II ended 30 years before.
Yeah.
It is a huge part of like the collective memory of Americans at this point in the world, right? There are so many World War II vets still.
Yes.
And so Quint is one of them, right? And so that aspect of masculinity of like conquering and defeating and very athlete, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also the idea of like that being maybe a consciousness that doesn't exist in the current generation
Yeah.
of the time of this movie, you know, in terms of those differences between like Quentin Hooper and even with Brody, where it's like this old school version of masculinity that is like definitely something that is still like kind of like revered and looked up to, but also kind of old fashioned.
And also,
you know?
like, especially at this point in the you know, in U.S. history, is like, we're really trying very hard to ignore the trauma that comes along with that, right? So, like, the thing is that, so Quint, I love this little bit of historical fiction, right? Are you familiar with the story of the USS Indianapolis?
Only passing knowledge.
I mean, Quint...
I don't know, do like a Wikipedia summary is my amount of knowledge.
Yeah, basically, yeah, and like, I think
does it.
Quint does a pretty good job of explaining it, right? Yeah.
I feel like he really emphasizes the sharks.
Yes.
Which I feel like maybe weren't emphasized in my original understanding. Like, they were there.
Yeah. So
I guess it is like the biggest.
It is interesting because
shark
he
attack,
is like, because what the USS Indianapolis did was like help deliver
fucking
the bomb that would end up being dropped on Hiroshima and
Big
Nagasaki.
Boy. Which one? I think they helped deliver Big Boy.
Okay.
Is that what it is? The name
Just
is?
one, not both.
I think they delivered right for one of them.
Just one. Okay. So like it is this like heroic mission. Like we have this super top secret thing that is going to, you know, solidify, you know, American exceptionalism that like will end this war and like
by
we
sacrificing so many Japanese civilians.
And
it's
we
all
will
about sacrifice.
And we will be heroes, right? You know, and we will, you know, come back and we will be well regarded and, you know, this is also something that is definitely something you would only expect like a man to be able to do, right?
Yeah.
Who else but a ship full of Navy men?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Delivering a top secret weapon to a top secret location to a
fantasy.
Very much so.
And then the way it gets, I was going to say subverted, but it was real life. It seems
it's real.
To talk about real life being subverted by a fucking shipwreck.
Yeah.
But you know, that like the masculine fantasy comes up against reality so often. The masculine fantasy can't actually live up to reality because it is a fantasy. Yeah. And I think you see that not just in Quint, but like you're talking about Brody being like the family man, the father.
Yeah.
But like the actual glimpses we get of his family life are kind of like not, you know, I don't know. I guess kind of what you would expect of a 70s dad.
Exactly. I definitely chalk it up to 1970s parenting.
Yeah.
1,000%. Yeah.
There's just the part, I don't know. The one that stuck out to me was when that scene we were talking about where Hooper shows up, where he's like, "Is your husband home? I'd like to talk to him."
Yeah.
And Brody's wife says, "So would I." And I'm just like, saying a lot with those 3 words.
Yeah.
Ellen.
Yeah. And like also when like the kids are just chilling out completely unsupervised near the water and he's like, do you want to get drunk and like fool around?
Yeah.
You know, like, do you not want to go supervise your children like who are just on a body of water?
Yeah, even without sharks being involved.
Yeah, like that's just dangerous. But he's like, nah.
Yeah, and he's like, he's still pretty convinced there's going to be a shark attack, but don't worry, my son can still take his boat out. He'll be in this other body of water, so it's probably fine.
Yeah.
And it's like,
I think I just chalk that up to 70s parenting.
Yeah. I don't know. And he's such an interesting, like his desire to make a difference, which I think is also a very, it's not one that you brought up, but that's a very masculine fantasy too, of having to be like, that I think this movie,
get to be the hero.
This movie perpetuates is the idea of that like one person can make a difference. One man who believes in what's right and is a good husband and father and upstanding citizen in the world.
Yes.
He can make a difference. Like that's literally why he left New York.
Yeah.
He talks about how he felt like ineffectual.
Yeah.
And then, like, but in Amity, one man can make a difference. He literally says that.
Literally says it, yeah.
Because then I say, the crime rate was too high.
But little does he know that one man is the mayor and not him.
Yeah. One man can make a difference. Oh boy, yes he can. Yeah.
And it's not you. Although he is, we've said already, like he's the one who gets that shot that ends up killing the shark.
I know, he's interesting because then there's so many things that like the way Mrs. Kittner slaps him and blames him for not because he knew and he didn't close the beach, even though that was really the mayor's fault.
Yeah, go slap the mayor.
But I guess she wouldn't know that. It does seem like that should be Chief Brody's job to, like, protect people, and he didn't do it.
Yeah.
And just the way that he accepts that guilt.
Yeah.
But then this next scene where they're having dinner, another interesting family moment, is Hooper is trying to convince Brody to, like, go autopsy that shark they caught to prove that it's not the shark.
Yeah. Because
it's just a poor, innocent, hapless shark.
Little tiger shark,
minding his own business. But basically Brody's like, yeah, let's just go do it. Let's just go right now. Let's go autopsy the shark.
Yeah.
And Ellen's like, can you do that? And for some reason, Brody of all people says, I can do anything. I'm the chief of police. And I'm like, now you can. Now you can do it. Like, sure, yeah. After you, I mean, like, despite the fact that he wasn't able to close the beach.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that he wasn't able to do anything about the coroner changing the report that he knew was wrong.
Yeah.
Like, and of course, it's right after Mrs. Kittner literally says that her son is dead and there's nothing you can do. Like, he very much gets called out for not being able to do anything. Yeah. So now he's talking himself up big. Like, yeah, no,
I can do things.
I can do anything.
I can
I'm
act.
here in Amity.
Yes.
So that I can make a difference.
Yes.
Back in New York, I couldn't make a difference because of the hoodlums.
The JDs.
Yeah. But yeah, no, it's interesting because then, Brody starts to talk a big game, but then still when he's out on the boat, he's not the expert. Literally, why is he on the boat?
Why is he on that boat? What does he offer?
He's afraid of water.
He's
afraid
not
of
into
drowning.
the water. Yeah. He doesn't have any understanding of sharks other than what he looked up in his
I guess that's another reason, though, also why we're supposed to be impressed by him and his everyman hero sort of thing is that, like, he's facing his fear.
He rose to the occasion.
He rose to the occasion.
Yeah.
He's taken charge, even though it's, like, not really his place, but somebody's got to do it.
Did they need a third person on the
he does
boat?
end up being
That boat is
helpful.
also quite small.
Because there's when Quint's setting up something and Hooper's kind of driving the boat, and he's he's like putting out the chum or whatever, and he's like, why can't Hooper do the chum? And Quint's like, well,
he's driving.
As much as I don't like Hooper, he actually can do things and you can't.
That you can't.
Which is like such a
because he's been on a boat before.
For Brody, where it's like, yeah, Brody, you literally can't do anything but this like one easy dirty job.
Yeah,
like that's
the
literally
chum.
all you're good for is the chum.
Yeah,
and like there's so many shots where we see him just sort of like firing his little gun. I don't know about guns, what kind of gun it is.
Neither do I.
It's like a little pistol or something at the shark, and I'm like, you think your little tiny officer's pistol is gonna like hurt this giant shark that we're trying to harpoon right now?
And it's not working.
Like, you're just trying to feel helpful, and then so it's become so interesting that like he's not helpful on the boat. He's not even a part of the camaraderie really that starts to develop between Hooper and Quint. He's just kind of there. He's just the everyman who's there, and yet he's the one who kills the shark. And like in the book, he's even the only one who makes it back alive.
Right. Yeah.
You know? And it's like, why though?
Yeah.
And it's literally just to be like, this could be you. You too could be the one to kill the shark. It doesn't matter if you have no skills.
and no business being on that boat.
And just kind of an okay dad.
Yeah. Probably a great dad by the standards of the time.
I mean, he sees his kids quite often, it seems.
He lives with his kids, so that,
you know.
Anyway.
Yeah. I don't know. He's just an interesting character because he's so ineffectual, but he's like our hero.
Yeah. Well, and
he's our final girl.
He is. He's a final boy. Yeah.
Yeah. He gets the final showdown.
Yeah. He's like with the shark. If we're gonna keep the psycho killer idea going, then yeah. But it's interesting because like I guess Brody technically has like dominion over the land because he's like the chief of police, right? But then like Quint and Hooper together, they more have the dominion over the sea, right? Because like we're introduced to Quint in the first half of the film, and then we don't see him for an hour.
It is interesting. He comes in like
he's in the town meeting, which is what a good citizen of him, right? Like he's in the town meeting and he does that awful nails on the chalkboard thing to get everybody's attention, right?
And he has his silly little chalk drawing of a man-eating shark
that he's like drawing as he's explaining the situation.
I'm like, that's very helpful, Quint. Thank you.
Thank you, Quint.
Thank you for your beautiful artwork. You are an artiste. You missed your calling.
So we do see him, but then like then he just like fucks off for an hour, and then he comes back because they're loading up the boat, and it's his boat that they take, the Orca, right? And so it's like Brody is not in his element. That we even mentioned that he doesn't like water. He doesn't
He's
really want to be on a boat. Yeah.
I don't know what his element is, but it's not the water.
But then he does rise to the occasion.
Yeah, which is very... I do want to talk about him. Just have a little ACAB corner.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah.
It's actually not going to be super ACAB-y.
Okay.
But we do need to mention that he's a cop, and I hate cops. It just wouldn't be Deep Thought Shallow Plots if Katie didn't mention that she hates cops.
Yeah.
When there's a cop, and he is one of our heroes. Yeah. So we gotta talk about it. But I do think he's interesting. I don't know, just sort of thinking about the sort of cops that we see in media today, even the ones who are heroic. Like, he is neither the cause of harm, which we would see with like crooked cops sort of storylines, but nor is he really the one preventing harm.
No, he doesn't really get to do that. Yeah.
Like
he sure tries.
Yeah, he sure tries, but like he left New York City because he was like, I wasn't doing anything there. He literally admits, he was like, yeah, there was nothing that I could do there to make any sort of difference.
Yeah.
And then, like, so he goes to Amity because he thinks maybe he'll make a difference there.
Yeah.
But, like, he can't save anyone from the shark. He can't even close the beach. He's not the scientific expert.
Yeah.
He's not the grizzled fisherman. He's, like, just some guy. But he kills the shark in the end, like we were talking about. Yeah. It's the masculine fantasy. But it's, like, interesting to put that on a cop who we look to as, like, who cops would like us to look to as, like, the savior figure, the protector, the last line of defense. Like, when Mrs. Kittner blames him and it's like, you knew my boy is dead and there's nothing you can do about it. It's not just, like, pointing out his ineffectualness, but it's also, like, isn't that kind of the way with cops, though? On my ACAB bullshit? Where it's, like, even the most generous understanding of cops tends to have them showing up after the harm has been committed.
It's true. Yeah.
You know? It's like, the thing has happened. The person has been hurt. The only thing the cop can do is, like, put them in jail or, in this case, kill an innocent shark that wasn't even related to it and then eventually kill the right shark. But, like...
But wait, I don't think Brody had anything to do with the killing of the wrong shark.
He just got his pose in the picture.
He was just in the picture. Yeah. He wanted to get in.
But like in like a weird way where he's taking credit for it because that's when Mrs. Kittner shows up. Was like right when he's posing for the picture, all smiley and happy, like I did it, I saved the world.
Yes. Yeah.
And then Miss Kittner's like, no, you didn't. My son's fucking dead.
Yeah, my son's still dead.
And it's like even when they do kill Mr. Jaws, like is that the justice that Mrs. Kittner is looking for? No, what she wanted was to know beforehand and have her son not die.
Yeah.
So it's like, what does it do for her to know that like this shark is dead or that shark is dead or like 10 sharks are dead? Like none of it, like even if they're being killed in her son's name,
right?
It's like an act of vengeance. Like how is that justice when there was another when there was another route where her son never would have been in that beach to begin with if he had just done his job.
Right.
So this is kind of I don't know, it's an interesting narrative about a cop where it's like, he's our everyman hero. Anybody could be this guy and stand up for what's right. But also, he fucked up really bad. And there were so many lives he could have saved that he didn't. Like, it seems like Mrs. Kittner somehow didn't even know about the shark.
Right.
Which is wild, because it seems like some people did. So, like, word of mouth, some people have heard about the shark, and some people haven't, and some people believe it, and some people don't.
You think that, like, that Brody could have at least done that. Like, maybe his authority was thwarted for
but he could have
actually
been, like,
closing the beach.
Cop PSA, there have been shark sightings.
Yeah.
There has been a possible shark sighting.
Yeah.
I feel like the American get mad about a possible shark sighting. And like, if locals want to not bring their kids down. Whatever.
Yeah.
The tourists probably wouldn't even listen to that bulletin.
Yeah. They wouldn't even care.
I don't know. It's interesting. Just just how little he does, and yet he's our final good boy.
Yeah.
It's like really interesting.
Yeah, because, like we do finally get once they're on the boat, right? And like for the back half of the film, right? And we're getting to know these characters. Yeah, it's like Hooper and Quint that are swapping stories.
Yeah.
And then we just like the camera every once in a while goes back to Brody, who's just kind of like smiling like a goof. Like, this is fun.
What's his one scar? It's like an appendectomy scar.
Oh, when
he
got his,
he has like some surgery scar that he's like, I have this. And they're like, we're talking about like fucking moray eels.
Yeah,
and, like,
sharks. Yeah.
And, like,
he's like, I got my appendix taken out.
It's like, okay, Brody.
Yeah.
We're gonna be over here rubbing our legs together.
Yes, seriously. So yeah.
Should we just I think it's probably time that we've really just dialed down on like the trauma, and the scars, and the literal scars, and the metaphorical scars.
Ones, yes.
Because I mean, you already talked a bit about Quint's monologue, but
well,
just sort of the historicity of it. Do you want to say more about it?
Yeah, just like he is a World War II vet, right? And like that. And that like he, I think, does kind of represent a sort of like a collective trauma and like national narrative of World War II.
Yeah. For
Americans, right?
And the lack of support afterwards.
Yeah.
Or like the kind of support that was needed.
Right, because I think it's also worth noting that at this point in time, like, we didn't know what PTSD was, right? We called it war shock, right? Shell shock. We called it a bunch of things, but like it wasn't until studying Vietnam War vets
that they really
they even came up with like this idea of a post-traumatic stress disorder, right? So like, and then I think like the US government came up with some bullshit about how like no war veteran before the Vietnam War could be diagnosed with PTSD because it didn't exist.
So
Yes. So it's interesting that we've got this
like people who argue that gay people didn't exist for like the 19th century because we didn't use that term, but like gay people existed.
Right,
Like,
yeah.
we don't need the language. Like the world exists without the language.
Yeah.
The world is out there.
Yeah. So
our language changes.
So he's like, you know, he puts on this big tough facade and he goes on this big speech, right? But like he's obviously pretty fucked up.
He's
you know?
I mean, he married at least 3 times.
At least 3 times, yeah. And
which just I mentioned because it shows that he's having a hard time with social connection.
yes.
You know?
And like so he's just kind
He
of
seems like a loner.
surrendered to his life at sea.
And he does a lot of acts. I mean, I think people talk a lot about him specifically in the Moby Dick references.
Yes.
You know, because he has a lot of Ahab
Very
vibes.
Ahab, yep.
I think in the book it's even more clear, but the idea is that just like Ahab got his like bitten off.
Yeah.
When Quint dies, it's because he gets that rope wrapped around his leg and like pulled under the water.
Yeah, into the shark's mouth. Yeah.
I think in the book he actually just drowns, which is kind of funny. but here he gets like
No,
eaten.
it makes more sense for him to be eaten by the
But I
shark.
do kind of like the idea of like, yeah, you're out in a boat.
Yeah.
Like there are other harms at sea.
Yeah, this is true. Yeah.
But anyway, there's that like Ahab, Quint commits a lot of like interesting acts of like self-annihilation that probably comes from that place of trauma and like feeling like he should have maybe died then. Because he talks about how like he'll never wear a life jacket again. You know?
Oh, right, because he had one on in his incident with the USS Indianapolis, but it like
it left him floating in the water for days.
Yeah.
And I think he thinks that like he would rather die than be again in that situation where it's like the fear of not knowing if he's going to live or die, when it's coming. He would
just
rather just go down right away.
Yeah.
Than like have that waiting.
And I think also, having never served in the military, I think there's also something, and I think it kind of goes with like the hero thing of like, you know, any person can make a difference. That I think like it's my understanding a lot of like veterans, especially combat veterans, like they don't see like themselves as being particularly integral, but like the people they serve with.
Yeah.
Especially the ones who maybe don't make it are like kind of put up on a pedestal.
Yeah, and like that's kind of survivor's guilt.
Yeah, very much so.
Stuff. And it is interesting that like he says he's not going to use a life jacket ever again. And like when the boat starts to sink, he does have life jackets on his boats because he passes them out to Brody and Hooper. He just doesn't put one on himself. And the other interesting thing he does is that he destroys the radio.
Oh, yeah.
Do you have thoughts on like why he does that? I love actually the first scene we get with the radio where Ellen calls. Yeah. And he's like, "Oh yeah, your husband's totally fine. Yep. He'll be back for dinner." When like the shark is actively attacking them. Yes. And I'm like, "Oh, you are clearly lying, or are you that confident that you have this under hands?" I'm like, Quint's motives, like his I don't know.
He's lying. I think like
putting her at rest sort of, or like at ease.
I think like Quint is like I think from his perspective, he's like, this is probably it for me. Yeah. And like, I am totally cool with this being it for me. Yeah. Right. To like this be my last hurrah to like go head to head with a shark one more time.
Shark, just like the great white whale. Yeah. We get it, Ahab.
Yeah.
But
and that like that maybe Quint is on effectively a suicide mission.
Yeah.
And that like he knows or maybe even hopes that he's not going to come back.
Right. Like I said, something about like the fate, like he was meant to die then. Like we started to touch on.
Fate for sure.
And so like this is the shark that he's going to die too since he didn't die then. Like maybe in some way the shark has even come back for him specifically.
Right.
Just like Moby Dick is there for Ahab specifically. And it's like, nah, it's just a whale. I don't know, man.
It's just doing whale things,
it's also
man.
God, but it's just a whale.
It's also just a whale, man. I don't know what to tell you. They're whales. Like you're kind of in their territory, but whatever.
Yeah. No, but yes, I get that vibe from him, but also the way that he doesn't think, like, he gets the life jackets, but then when, like, Brody's like, famous line, I think you need a bigger boat, yeah, blah, 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 and then, like, he wants to, like, call, I don't know exactly who he's going to call, but he's about to call somebody on the radio, not his wife, but, like, somebody to, like, back up, essentially, like, he's calling for backup, and that's when Quint destroys the radio,
right,
and I'm like, why does he do that? Because it's not just him he's going to be taking down. And, like, Ahab does a lot of that in Moby Dick, too, where he doesn't really think about the fact that this is going to take the whole ship down because it's all about him and his vengeance.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's really where Quint's coming from or if he's more coming from a place of, like, we are the ones who are going to take on the shark, or we are going to die trying.
Yeah, I am.
That's like his mission.
Or it's like a parallel to the trauma that he survived because no one knew where they were.
Yeah.
So no one could come back them up.
That it's a weird. He's like recreating the circumstances.
And he's like,
of
nope,
his
it's
previous
just
trauma.
us and this shark.
And we're going to play this out however it goes.
Yeah.
And we're going to let sort of fate decide, not other people. It's going to be about us and the shark.
Yeah, and our actions.
And yeah, I don't know. In a weird way, it's like taking control of that story as like can be a healthy way to deal with trauma is to like kind of like take control of that narrative. But like, I don't know that you're doing it. Maybe try it with a therapist.
Yeah, but he does, like you mentioned, like he does make sure that Hooper and Brody have life jackets, right?
Yeah,
and that like there are safety measures on the boat as much as there can be.
Yeah,
right.
But then he takes down the radio.
But that
it's our. He just really wants it to be all about us.
Yeah, and that's obviously after they've already all bonded, right?
Right. I mean, maybe he doesn't want that experience for them.
Right.
Even if he did, leave them with the life jackets or whatever. He's like, we're going to go down to this shark.
Yeah.
We're not going to have, like, any thought of there being hope for us.
Yeah.
Either we kill the shark or the shark kills us. Like, don't live with that false hope or something. Like, the hope would be worse. Maybe. Because it was kind of worse for him to be there, like, are we going to get saved in time? Aren't we?
Right.
Is my friend going to get saved in the time? No, he didn't.
No.
I hoped maybe he would.
Yeah.
You know, like maybe he's trying to take away their hope because the hope was what hurt him.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. That
or
might be too deep.
what stays with him.
Yeah.
30 years later, right?
Yeah.
Well, also, I think it's worth mentioning that it is Quint's ship. It's his boat.
It's his boat.
He's the captain of the Orca,
and he's got to go down with it.
And I think he's going down with it very Ahabby. Yeah, we know.
Yeah.
But also like. It's his boat, and like we mentioned how like he's been married at least 3 times and like has issues with those interpersonal connections that like maybe he's like, this is my boat and I can do whatever I want.
Yeah.
On it.
I mean, he does sort of make decisions and decide, like we said about him sort of like ignoring Hooper's expertise.
Yeah.
He does sort of like take control of like, this is how we're going to hunt this shark.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care about Hooper's fancy shit.
Yeah.
Eventually he agrees, okay, go down in your weird shark cage and like try to poke him with your little dart.
Oh, that didn't work. I knew it wouldn't.
But like he's very much like, this is how we take care of a shark.
Yeah.
My rules, my boat.
Yeah.
My life. Yeah. I mean, I could see him wanting to have control over everything as like a trauma response.
Yeah.
And also it's just sort of like a masculine thing. And I could also see why that makes Hooper sort of rub him the wrong way, because Hooper is somebody who is very in control of himself.
Yeah.
And doesn't really care. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's interesting. But then they do bond, and it's over their scars.
Right.
And like I said, they rub their legs against each other. Right. They undress.
They expose like their skin to each other,
Yeah.
right? They're like lifting up pant legs, lifting up shirts,
Yeah.
right? To like show their bodies to each other,
Yeah.
right? And just like for their bodies to be like marveled at,
Yes.
you know?
And ooh, their big masculine power of the things that they survived.
Yes, yeah, and like the scars that were left because of it, right?
Yeah, like all these cool masculine adventures. And this is primarily what that Jen Corrigan essay we were talking about, 3 Men on a Boat, was about, was just sort of like the homoeroticism
very
inherent in those 3 guys. And like it always, I love that Barbara Kruger piece, that art piece that's like, it's a picture of like men in sort of like a little row, a little fight, and over it says you construct intricate rituals which allow you to touch the skin of other men. You know,
yeah,
and it felt very like that, where it's like, guys, why are you going to all these lengths? You just want to rub your legs together. Nobody cares,
right? Yeah, and then their legs end up next to each other. They end up like cheering to each other.
Legs.
Like
okay, boys. It's just
tell me how you really feel, you know. Well, and also what I liked about, what was the name of the writer of that piece from?
Oh, Jen Corrigan.
What I really liked about that is like that, yeah, sort of the way that you know, really severe and serious masculinity really can't help but be homoerotic. Yeah, because like
it's so like anti.
Feminine. There's nothing feminine about it.
So what else does it have to like sort of put desire on?
And the way that
each other.
And just I really just liked the main message of that piece of like the idea of like, you know, the spectrum of queerness, right? Like just because we know Quint has been married to women.
Yeah.
We know Brody is married to a woman,
We
right?
know Cooper had at least one ex-girlfriend.
Yeah,
He
whatever.
mentions her.
Yeah. Then, like... Oh, so we've mentioned the fact that they've been in romantic relationships with women, therefore they could not possibly have any homosexual inclination towards each other. But it's just like, but no, actually, that's not really how that works.
How that works, and for a host of different reasons.
Yeah, and just like also, but like the way that our society has like not allowed men to be comfortable around each other,
like that. It's like you can't hold hands, which is not at all like that. Doesn't need to be like a sexual or erotic act, like holding hands or something. But it's like if you saw two men holding hands, you'd be like, oh, gay shit.
Yeah, I was like,
or
oh, they're probably dating. Yeah.
Like, which, you know, is not the way in other cultures. Like in the Middle East, it's very common for men to hold hands.
I know, I love it because they're
the
friends.
We have a reaction where we're like, good for them.
Yeah.
They're touchy.
Yeah, I'm
I've been so different to us.
Yeah, well, and especially just over the last couple of school years, I've seen my male students be like so much more physically affectionate with each other. They hug each other more, and like kind of that like intricate ritual to touch each other. Like they're not roughhousing. They're like those. They roughhouse. Don't get me wrong. Right.
Yeah. But they don't need to do the roughhousing.
No, they just like straight up hug
because it's good to just have some human contact.
Yeah, and
that's just like normal, like
like checking in on each other. Like, hey, how's it going? You know,
it like doesn't have to be a thing.
Know about each other's lives, and like that.
It all comes from that that homophobia.
Yeah. So like, what's happening in this scene is like that at least Quint and Hooper and then Brody by proxy are developing a pretty deep level of intimacy.
Yeah.
And
they're sharing a lot.
They are, yeah.
Especially
and like
when Quint gets
when Quint shares what he shares, like that that's a huge intimate moment. He's like,
and it changes their relationship going forward.
Yeah. And then the other two were just like, well, I didn't know that about you, and now I feel like I know you better.
Yeah,
right?
I understand so much more where you're coming from. It'll make us going forward. It'll make things so different.
Yeah, but like
it creates empathy.
But in so many ways, just the like society doesn't allow men to do that, to like develop intimacy. Like intimacy actually has nothing to do with sexual attraction. It just has to do with being open and honest with the people in your life who matter to you.
And the fact that there's just something about how like even in this movie where we do get this scene of like open intimacy between them, it also still though has to be like mediated through like these are war stories.
Violence.
These are stories of violence. These are stories of men getting hurt and stuff. And not only that, but it's like
and man versus nature.
Is that it like before the Quint monologue, it sort of culminates in like Hooper talking about the worst scar of all, and he like opens up his shirt and says his broken heart from Mary Ellen Moffat. Yeah, and it's like I don't know. Girl. It's like we're going to talk about his third wife.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about Mary Ellen Moffat.
Yeah.
We're going to insert women into this just to make sure, because sure, we're being intimate, but like no homo, guys.
But no homo. Yeah, exactly.
And it's just like, and all
the
the
1975 version of no homo. Yeah.
And I also think it's interesting that like including Mary Ellen Moffat as like a wound, a scar.
Yeah.
It sort of like equates this woman to like sharks.
Yeah, to
eels and all those other dangers.
To a monster.
Yeah, to a monster. Yeah. Like women are dangerous. And the other men like accept that. They're like, that heartbreak, we've been there, man. Yeah. And it's like, because women are dangerous. They're like damaging in some way.
Yeah, and they're not seen as like human, right?
Yeah,
they're objects or animals,
and
right?
I think that's
just
where
like
a lot of the like
the eel or what is Hooper's? He gets an eel or a
I think it's
moray.
Isn't a moray a type of eel?
Is that what he says? It's a moray.
I think it's a moray eel.
Or was it something about?
He definitely mentions an eel.
Yeah, yeah.
And then Quint mentions another shark.
Yeah, sharks. Oh yeah, the kind of shark that Brody's like, what's that? And he was like, it's a kind of shark.
Yeah.
You don't get it, you know.
You're not a part of this.
Yeah.
With your appendix scar.
Yeah.
We're having a homosocial moment right now.
Yeah, right.
You're not invited.
Having grown up or being from and being identified as like someone from the city, right? Yeah, very far away from the sea where they live. Yeah, so
he's never been attacked by a shark and had his boat gone down beneath him, except for now he has. So
yeah,
I don't know, but I do kind of want to talk about. A lot of people read certain amounts of like misogyny into this film, or like an anti-feminine message, and I feel like I don't know. It could be. I do think I'm really just using this as an excuse to talk about Chrissy Watkins some more.
Let's do it.
Because I do want to talk about Chrissy Watkins, but I do think there is something sort of like, I think Quint's kind of misogynist. And like we were talking about how like in that super masculine vibe, it's hard to not get kind of homosexual or homoerotic about it because it's so anti-feminine, you know? That like in creating the super masculine vibe, it has to therefore be against women. Yeah, and in the equating of the woman who hurt Hooper to all these sharks and eels and stuff, it is equating women with like something dangerous.
Right.
And so I sort of see why some people read the sort of like vagina dentata, sort of that stuff. But
I'm not mad at it.
I mostly want to talk about Chrissy Watkins because it's like, why in this movie do we need the whore, quote unquote, to die first?
But
I mean,
by
she
the
always
way,
does.
worth noting, played by Susan Backlinie is how I'm choosing to say that person's last name, who just very recently passed away.
Oh,
yeah,
R.I.P.
Yeah,
she does great in this.
But
movie.
and for like, she does have dialogue, which is
She
nice,
does.
right?
Yeah.
But for what a small part she has to be like our first,
the one that kicks it off, and also kind of I think the only woman victim of the shark. I think everybody else is like boys and men.
Yeah, and that poor dog, R.I.P.
One Tippet.
Yeah.
Which sounds like a boy name, but I don't know.
I don't
Could have
know.
been a girl dog.
Yeah.
And I do think there's something like intuitively obvious about like why in these movies the horror always dies first, and I think we've sort of talked about like why that is and why it is about like the transgression and the need to be punished and stuff and like. But I don't know. I guess I just didn't expect to see it in this movie because it seems sort of like pre a lot of that slasher stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well. Yeah. Yeah.
You know. And it's like she really does get killed because she has this free relationship to her own sexuality. And she's like choosing to go skinny dipping.
Yeah, and she's like trying to flirt with a boy.
Yeah.
Maybe try to get laid, right? It's also like established that they are imbibing intoxicants,
right,
that they're drinking. There looks like there's marijuana there or something, you know.
It's unclear how much these two know each other.
Yeah.
Because they're like across the way from each other and they're just making the eyes. They're kind of cruising a little bit. And like, of course, like all of our horrors and slashers, she like first has to put on a show before she gets sacrificed.
Yeah, she's got to go skinny dip.
Yeah.
Get in the water.
And we even have the shot where we kind of see her swimming overhead, like from the shark's eyes, which we always get in slasher movies. We always see like the kill, you know, and the sort of lurking, just so that we have a moment to like appreciate the female body, basically, like that kind of lustful gaze. And it's like, she didn't
also
need
like
to be skinny dipping for this scene.
but not in a way that actually gives the female form any power or agency. Like it's literally her legs, right?
Yeah.
Like she's objectified. She's like cut and like not a full person.
Yeah,
right?
and she literally gets cut.
And
it's not. We end up with like just her leg or something, just her arm or something. What we do see of her is like one body part, and like I don't think she needed to be skinny dipping for this scene to work. You know what I mean? Like they chose that as like how it was gonna start because that's just how these scenes go, even back then. I guess.
I think I definitely don't think, like, certainly there is, like, a misogynistic read here, but I just don't think that was the intent.
Well.
Not to say that it's not the impact, but I just don't think it's the intent. And, like,
I mean, I do think the intent was to have something sexy.
Yeah. And, like, I think it was just very much, like, reflecting, you know, sort of, like, holding up a mirror to society's understanding of like women's role. Like what blows my mind every single time I think about it is that literally around this time, like I think it's been almost 50 years that like women could not get their own bank account or credit card.
I know.
Until about 50 years ago. Like that is insanity to me. So like if that's the world we're living in where a woman needs her husband or her father to sign off for her to have her own credit card.
Yeah.
Then like then that's what a woman that's what the role a woman would have in this film.
But I don't know how much that goes into her being like her need to be sexualized before she's killed. Why there's always that connection.
Yeah.
And like how a lot of the deaths in this movie actually kind of happen off screen, or they aren't very they're pretty quick,
or they happen underwater. Yeah,
you know, and we like don't see a bunch of it, or we just see like some blood spray. We spend a lot of time like on her face as she's dying. She gets kind of jinked around and stuff.
Yeah, she gets like, around. She goes under. She comes back up, and she goes back under. Yep.
And that like she's the first. Like Jaws doesn't attack anybody until he is lured by this like feminine mystique or something.
That's true,
that like she's like somehow summoning him with her feminine sexuality.
That is like the way that that we get introduced to the shark. Like, we don't know what that shark's been up to.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. It almost like he's been lured, or she, we don't know,
Yeah.
has been, lured, right?
Yeah. I
As
guess
if the shark, well, like in the way that the way that in a typical slasher film, a psycho killer would in a lot of ways be a surrogate for the audience.
to like
The way
deal with that.
the shark in a lot of ways is a surrogate for the audience as well.
Yeah. So I do think there's something there. And even in the book, it talks about, it sort of does that scene from Jaws' perspective. And he smells Christy, which is like interesting.
Interesting.
Especially when you think about like blood, like the idea that sharks can smell blood,
blood
or whatever.
from very
like,
far away,
Yeah.
yeah.
And it's like, what is he smelling on her? Is
Yeah.
she on her period? Like,
Yeah,
what's
is she
happening?
menstruating? What?
Like,
Yeah.
what is happening here? Like, or is she just is Jaws smelling sex? Like, what? Like,
Yeah.
whatever. There's something, though, very clearly feminine and bodily that is drawing him in. And
Yeah.
it's like, I don't know. It's like this weird.
That just he cannot stand for. He's
Yeah,
like, I
yeah,
must.
yeah.
Or is so intrigued and enticed by that, like he then must consume, right?
Yeah. There's a lot of people who've written about the sort of feminine, I don't know, the misogyny or like the play between genders in this movie. In this movie that is mostly just about three men. Yeah.
In a boat.
And I think there is something about...
Which, it's worth noting, let's not forget that boats are often feminized as well.
Because there's, like I said, there is something to be said about the femininity of water and also about like the women getting compared to water or like
Yes.
to sharks or to boats.
Yeah.
And also like what that says then about like all the different men's view of sharks or water. Like what then does it mean that Brody is afraid of the water? What does that tell you about his relationship to women? If we're doing that sort of deep thoughts metaphor,
Yeah.
so what does it mean that Hooper has this like weird fascination and always wants to like look at them, look at the sharks and love sharks and like wants to study them? And like what does it mean that Quint like is really aggressive?
Yeah,
and, like
and-
wants to kill and
wants to
stronger.
destroy them,
And then
yeah.
like you talked about it being like those three types of masculinity.
Right.
These are kind of like three types of misogyny where you have like the fear of women.
Yeah.
You have the like voyeuristic.
Yeah.
Sort of sexualizing thing, and then you have that aggressive wanting to conquer thing.
Yeah.
That is like, I don't know. I could see there being something there. I don't know how deep I would want to get into it, but
Right,
like I see
again-
why people bring it up.
Yeah, I totally can too, but again, I really just don't see that being part of the intent in this film.
Yeah, but then it's like, I don't know if I care much about authorial intent. Especially in projects where you have a lot of different people bringing their own intent.
Right. Yeah, like Steven Spielberg's the director, but like, come on,
But it's
girl.
like, who chose that original
Yeah.
symbolism of the head of the shark sort of going towards this naked woman that
Yeah,
was
yeah,
the
yeah.
original cover of the novel and then became the original, the cover of the movie.
Yeah,
which has
the
like,
poster. Yeah.
has kind of phallic symbolism going straight towards this naked woman.
Yeah.
Like, who chose that? And what was the intent with that? You know? And then, like, you don't need the intent of vagina dentata for some people to have a sort of, like, castration fear.
Right.
With, like, Quinn getting bitten in half.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I don't know. There's something there. And there's something about all of their weapons are very, like, spears and penetrative.
That's
because,
true, yeah.
you know,
Like, and the guns, right, trying to shoot
and
at
he
it,
finally
right?
kills it by penetrating it through the mouth.
That's
blah, blah, blah.
true,
Lots of
yeah.
people write about that. And again, I'm kind of like, I'm not 100% sold, but
Yeah.
like, I'm not like against it. I do think Chrissy Watkins just as like the initial victim,
Yeah.
and then no other women die. But she like lures the show. I don't know. I do think there's an interesting thing in that, and with the knowledge of like the whore dies first, and first she puts on a show.
Right, yeah.
It's just sort of like interesting and stands out to me, especially when we don't have really other women to compare her to too much.
Right, we've got Mrs. Brody,
Yeah.
and then we've got the mother of the boy.
Like if we're really talking about what her sin is,
Yeah.
like we technically do have kind of like a little bit of domestic sexuality because he talks about fooling around with her or whatever, like they have that
yeah.
kind of and maybe some flirting or whatever, but like she doesn't really have any like agency, and Mrs. Kittner doesn't have any she doesn't even like stand up to her son when her son's like, I want to go back in the water, and she's like, okay, fine, you
Yeah.
know, like none of the women have any power over themselves or like the people around them except for Chrissy, who dies first.
Yeah.
She like really chooses what she does. She has agency.
Yeah.
And she dies.
And then she gets eaten by a shark about it.
Yeah. And yeah, but I mean, yeah, like you're saying, it's sort of like, 70s views of women.
Yeah, I think maybe we kind of go back to like a Madonna whore dichotomy.
I do think there's
Yeah.
that.
That Mrs. Brody is kind of more of that, like Madonna maternal figure, right?
And so is Mrs. Kittner, because she's specifically like the Pieta. She's, Mary after Jesus has been killed. She's the grieving mother, which
Yeah.
is a very powerful mother symbol.
Yeah. I think the fact is that like, yeah, this movie is so much about men, which I think is just such a big thing for Spielberg, masculinity
Yeah.
and father-son relationships, that like just as a result, a natural consequence of that is that there's just like no room for women
Yeah,
in this
the women
film.
are just kind of a side note.
Yeah, there's
afterthought.
Yeah, just kind of be like those cardboard cutouts. They're
Yeah,
just like,
and yet we start with a woman.
yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I will always be thinking of Chrissy Watkins, R.I.P.
R.I.P.
But enough of that bullshit. Tell me about music bullshit.
Oh my goodness, yes.
You want to tell me about music?
I really, really do. So, obviously, a huge aspect of what this has been noted by Steven Spielberg, that he believes that a large reason for Jaws' success is John Williams' score.
Yes.
Which I think is very apt.
I do think it is the most iconic part of this movie.
It's super iconic. So
and probably the most spoofed and like recognizable.
Absolutely. So, and at least for the motif of, so it's called a minor second, right? So we hear it all over the score, the dun-nut, 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 yeah. That's a minor second interval. Sometimes it's called a semitone. Sometimes it's called a half step. Sometimes it's called a half tone. I call it a minor second. That's me. Which is, so in Western music and Western music theory, it's the smallest interval. It's the closest you can get between any two notes is a minor second, right? If we get into, like, if we study, like, Eastern music, if we were study, like, music from India or, like, even, like, Tibet, we would be getting into, like, quarter steps and 16th steps and stuff like that. But, so it's really, it's super small, and it is considered, at least to our Western ears, the most dissonant of the intervals, right? So if you start at a note, like let's say just C, right? You do a minor second, a half step, you go to C sharp, right? And then, but then if you do a whole step, you go to D, right? So like we've got all these intervals that lead like through an octave, and there are some that are considered dissonant, right? So like when our ear hears one note followed by the other, both notes played at once, it just doesn't sound right.
It doesn't sound pretty.
No, it does not sound pretty, right? It sounds dissonant. It sounds like these two notes are almost
unsettling.
kind of like, it's very unsettling, and it almost feels like the two notes, like they're kind of like fighting, right? Yeah. So we kind of associate a minor second interval with like dissonance, harshness, unpleasantness, right? And
is that also a part of being like kind of unresolved? Because I know a lot of music, a lot of what makes music sound good to us is like the resolution
is when we resolve it, yeah,
and come back to it.
Yeah,
I could see that.
Then, so like basically the opposite of dissonance is consonance, right? So yeah, if we can like take the dissonance and resolve it, right? So like if we're thinking about like songs in minor keys, so like there's a lot of songs in minor keys that make us sad, or like even like, to me, there's some songs in minor keys that kind of creep me out, like very creepy vibes. So like there's a very famous, often performed Christmas song, Carol the Bells, that's in a minor key. And as a kid, it would always creep me out.
I do think that song's kind of creepy.
Yeah, it's like, why are we writing Christmas songs in a minor key?
Kind of like tense and weird.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, I don't care for this at all.
Wow.
So,
calm down.
Anyway, so we use different keys and different like key signatures to
elicit different
meanings and different emotions, obviously.
Yeah.
So we've got this dissonant minor second, right? That's just very harsh, very unpleasant, very dissonant, and not resolved, right? And it is pretty much exactly what Mr. Jaws represents, right? He's kind of this harsh, unpleasant reality.
Yeah, something that's come to unsettle.
Yeah, this resort town whose entire economy runs on the summer tourism that they get, right? So
he's a disruptor.
Yeah. So that minor second, and like it is what we call in music, it's called the way that that John Williams uses this minor second interval is what we would call ostinato, derived from the Italian word for stubborn, like obstinate.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So it's just like what ostinato in music just means when like we hear a motif or a phrase just played over and over again at like the same pitch with like the same musical voice, so like played by the same instrument, right? Just over and over and over again.
No change.
Yeah. And so that's what happens with the minor second, the dun yeah, just over and over.
The only thing that changes about it is that it gets faster,
yeah,
or closer.
Yeah. So it kind of leaves the audience with this like feeling of suspense, right?
Because it's unresolved.
There's impending doom. Something bad is going to happen, right?
That makes sense.
And then there's no resolution to bring us back to that feeling of safety, right? Because it's not going to happen, right? At least not until several people, including a child and
a dog
and Tippett, are dead, right? So the theme really heavily features that minor second, right? And it only ever plays when the shark is there. Now, we don't ever see... Well, there's the movie's 2 hours long. The shark gets 4 minutes of screen time?
Yeah, ridiculous.
So, but we hear the theme when we know that the shark is nearby, right? So, we hear it at the beginning. We don't see the shark when Chrissy dies.
It creates that dramatic irony suspense where the characters around you can't hear the music. So
exactly.
They don't know the shark's coming, but we do, so we get the suspense without even seeing anything.
Yes. And it's worth noting that there's also that scene where the kids play that prank with the fake shark fin, right? Yeah. And during that scene, there is no theme playing. Because it's not Mr. Jaws.
It's not Mr. Jaws. Yeah. It's an imposter.
Yes. It's just kids messing around, right?
That's very clever. I'll admit.
Very clever, yes.
Maybe this movie does have a few good parts. I
don't know. So we don't hear the theme because the shark's not there, right? During that thing. But we do hear the theme when the shark is there, even if we don't see the shark.
Yeah.
We know that something's happening,
so even
right?
if we're not really registering the music, we just get that feeling of dread and being unsettled.
Yeah, so
we, kind of subconsciously know.
It kind of creates
to the shark.
The shark then becomes the theme, and the theme becomes the shark.
Yeah.
They're one and the same. Yeah. Basically. I've got something a quote that I have from John Williams. He says that interval, that minor second, is meant to represent the shark as this kind of unstoppable force and a mindless and instinctive attacks.
Yeah.
Right? Yep. So what's interesting to me is I was thinking about it is we've got this dissonance, right? These two notes that just in our Western ears just don't sound right. You know, they might sound kind of scary or unsettling together, right? But the thing is again, I think I tried to tie this back into the man versus nature thing, right? Is that neither of the two notes, the E and the F or the F and the F sharp, neither of them are doing anything wrong, let's say. In another set of circumstances, those notes, either one of those individual notes could be used to complement or be part of a consonant pair of notes, right? So where the town ends up getting its economic boost, but not having to, not at the expense of the safety of the people who live there or the tourists that are visiting, right? And, the fact that the shark is just doing what fucking sharks do. And, if it were just in its own natural habitat, just being part of the natural ecosystem of the water away from these people, then, we don't have the dissonance. Everything is just doing what it's supposed to be doing.
Man and nature.
Yes.
And it's man choosing to put those notes together.
And it's not, and it sounds...
Which are just natural sounds.
And, it just sounds really dissonant. It sounds unsettling.
And we're, putting that on it. We're
it sounds incomplete.
That those notes are unsettling.
Yeah.
When some people hear it and maybe it wouldn't sound unsettling, but we're kind of trained to see it that
right.
way.
And then also very much so with a lot of things in music theory is that it does depend on the context, right? So we've got that ostinato of the minor second just being hammered into our heads, right?
And getting suspenseful and something's going to happen. I don't know what though.
But then also depending on how you play it, we do get that leading tone between the T and the do, if you will, of the octave, right? We do get that leading tone, that minor second that gets us to
back to our resolution.
Do. Yeah, back, boom, we're back at one, we're back at do, we're back at home base.
We kind of need to feel that moment of being kind of unsettled or unresolved so that we can recognize the resolution.
Okay, we're back now. Yeah, or to play a minor, to play a minor second interval or a chord that includes a minor second interval within it, right? And then go on to resolve it, right? Or again, just with literature, creating the conflict,
right?
And then either resolving
and
it,
having the climax then is followed by the falling action, the resolution.
Yeah, and yeah. So it's just really interesting, and what I love about it is it's a minor second, it's so simple, literally the two keys right next to each other.
Couldn't be easier.
Yeah, it's so interesting, how simple it is. And this is like the diatribe I was constantly going off when I was in music school. It's like, just because it's simple doesn't mean it's boring.
Yeah.
Right. Or not impactful.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, so like, it's just really interesting little example of very simple dissonance that our Western ears are so attuned to understanding and like knowing what it means and like the emotions that it evokes in us, right?
Yeah.
And just like how we're just kind of like waiting for the resolution, but like honestly, the resolution is like either the shark killing someone or when they finally do actually
kill the shark.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. But and so for
a little bit more.
literary corner, you're gonna talk about the Jaws effect, which I think I know what that is.
Yeah, I think probably everybody knows about this. This is going to be short, but it's like such a significant part of Jaws that it'd be weird not to talk about it. So we're going to talk about it, but first you need to play my music.
Literary corner, Jaws effect.
You get so jazzy on it. The idea of this literary corner, I mean, it goes back to a lot of what we were saying specifically about the man versus nature and like sharks just got to do what a shark got to do. The Jaws effect is just sort of like how Jaws totally changed our view of sharks. But to make it a literary corner, I do just kind of want to talk in general about how like it's so simple, I guess, obvious to say, but important to say that like novels and stories have always been able to like affect and change culture. It's not just that they're like reflecting culture. It's life imitates art just as much as art imitates life. Like we talked about like in our Black Christmas episode, how like a lot of our modern ideas of Christmas came when Charles Dickens was like popularizing Christmas. Oh my gosh, like,
yes,
he totally changed how we celebrate Christmas.
Yes.
Just, like he just wrote that.
Yeah.
You know? Or like, I don't know, I was thinking a lot about how like lots of people, including Abraham Lincoln, say that like Uncle Tom's Cabin changed the average white person's view of slavery. And like really kind of kickstarted the Civil War.
Yeah.
And like that was just a novel.
And it's interesting because when we like, I have never read Uncle Tom's Cabin.
Yeah.
But like my understanding
view
is
of
that
it
it's
now
like
is-
still pretty racist.
Right, yeah.
But from the perspective of the daily life of a non-enslaved person at that time. Yeah.
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 And like, I don't know, you could also think of like, you just sort of made me think of like Birth of a Nation or something and how that like.
As far as racism goes.
Yeah. And in terms of books that have affected the world.
Yeah.
And specifically in like racial politics in America. How Birth of a Nation is a story that actually led to like a tangible increase in KKK membership.
Yeah, they were like kind of down for the count.
Yeah.
And then they came back.
Yeah. Because of one story.
Yeah.
And just sort of like, and how those things are like, and Gone with the Wind, how both of those stories were used to sort of justify a lot of the Jim Crow stuff. You know? We obviously can't talk about every fucking story that has affected the real world.
Yeah.
I'm just sort of giving examples.
Yeah.
But like, we can talk about it having like positive examples like Uncle Tom's Cabin, but also I think more often, I don't know, there's just a lot of examples of like basically minorities getting fucked over because of bad stereotypes that are put into a story and those become like...
Well, yeah, because these stories, especially like if we're talking about this invention of something called a novel in like the 19th century, right? It's like, this is media. Yeah. It's just the same way media works now, just on a much smaller scale.
It's like what we talked about in our Sleepaway Camp episode, where it's like the whole idea of like the trans woman as psycho killer.
Yeah.
And how like things like Sleepaway Camp and the fucking Hannibal Lecter movie, Silence of the Lambs, did so much to damage the public perception of trans women.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. Conversely, our actual president right now, Joe Biden, crediting Will and Grace for like making people down with gay marriage. Yeah. You know, it's like it's such a double-edged sword what media can do.
Yeah.
And like on the one hand, it's reflecting changes in our culture and sort of like, you know, sometimes TV can feel almost out of date because it's like, yeah, we're all down with gay people now, you know? So sometimes it's just but other times it's like really on the cutting edge and it actually does change ideas and like and it like sometimes even gives us words to talk about things that we like just literally couldn't talk. Like the amount of times people now bring up like concepts from 1984 to talk about things that are like happening now.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like those are words we wouldn't have to talk about this. Like
That's
those
true.
are concepts that we didn't really.
Thank you, Orwell.
You know?
Yeah.
And it's not like the words create the concept, you know, create the reality, but the words create a capacity for us to understand the reality now.
So is this also what happens with Jaws?
Well, yeah. So I Jaws always comes up if you have a list of like 10 movies that like quantifiably changed the world. It's like Jaws and like Top Gun.
Top Gun. Yeah.
Quantifiable changes though, like Top Gun boosted.
That's true.
You know, what, Navy enlistment?
Air Force.
Whatever
Air Force
it is.
enlistment.
Yeah,
Probably
boosted
all
enlist- yeah.
military, but definitely Air Force.
Like,
yeah.
But yeah, even other movies, like people talk about how Sideways, which is about like
Yeah,
wines
wine,
and stuff.
yeah.
Like it actually encouraged people to buy Pinot Noir, and like Pinot Noir sales went up.
Okay.
So like the way that these things like have these really kind of, but yeah, with Jaws.
Anyway, yeah.
There's the Jaws effect, because Jaws is another one of these movies that is always brought up as like having an actual quantifiable effect on our world, like this movie and the novel it was based on, because the novel was actually kind of big too.
Yeah.
It came out the year before the movie.
Yeah, I know. What a quick turnaround.
Well, because
yeah.
the producers got advance copies and were already deciding to make it a movie.
Oh, okay.
And like Spielberg was already getting on
that's
board
why-
like, as it was coming out.
okay.
And there was also a huge media push behind the book and behind the movie.
Of course.
That was like, it was almost artificial, but you know, like the amount of buzz around the book wouldn't have happened unless people made it happen. You know what I mean? It was just kind of an adventure book.
Yeah.
But one thing that comes from the novel, actually, Jaws by Peter Benchley, one of his lines, he actually says, one of the characters says, "Sharks are like axe murderers. There's something crazy, evil, and uncontrollable about them." He literally says that in the book. Like
They're
that's a
axe
line.
murderers. Wow.
They're axe murderers. And there's so many things, like we've already talked about, where Jaws comes across as like a psycho killer,
Yeah.
senseless, emotionless, just out for the kill,
Yeah.
going to destroy everything.
Instinctual.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like having all of this put onto this shark.
Yeah.
This shark who, like, I feel like part of me wants to read Hooper as being really knowledgeable about sharks, because all the times where he's like, I don't think that's a shark.
Yeah.
It's probably because Jaws is not behaving how normal sharks behave.
This is true,
Like, there
yeah.
is something unusual about
Yeah.
But at the same time, everything we put on Jaws becomes what we all understand about sharks.
For
going
all
forward.
sharks.
Because
yes.
there are no other, I mean, there's one other shark in the movie, we just see it dead.
Yeah.
And
poor
everybody's
shark, yeah.
celebrating the fact that it died,
Yeah.
you know? So it's like this novel and movie and like the ridiculous hype machine that like surrounded them just really drove, like their goal in advertising it was don't go in the water. Be afraid of,
Yes.
what's under the water, or what's under the, like be afraid.
That's true.
And
Yeah.
like literally this summer after this movie came out, there
Yeah.
was like a notable decrease
Yeah.
in people going to the beach.
Yeah.
And a notable increase of people saying that they saw sharks.
Oh.
Whether or not they actually did, or
Yeah.
if it was like a little bit of minor hysteria,
Yes.
I don't know. But like, and then like, it wasn't enough just that people were then afraid of sharks and afraid of the water. It turned sharks into like this innately evil thing, where people felt emboldened to like go out and fight back against sharks and like kill sharks.
No.
So,
But they're so important for the ecosystem.
well, we didn't know that really at the
No.
time. And like a lot of people have compared the scene where all of the random amateur fishermen go out trying to catch the shark.
Oh, they're all out there,
with their
throwing
little
different
chum.
kinds of chum.
Well,
yes.
after this movie,
Yes.
in like the 80s, I think maybe even into the 90s, there were actual like, I don't know whether to call them tournaments or something like that, but it was like events where people go out shark fishing. And so it'd be a bunch of people going out on their boats with their chum and stuff and like trying to kill sharks, and you'd like win for getting the most sharks or like the biggest shark or something, where it's like it was literally a sport just to kill sharks, because it wasn't even like hunting for food or something like that. It was like you could feel good about doing this sport because you're ridding the oceans of a menace, of a monster,
of a fish version of an axe murderer.
Yeah. So it's like you don't even. Yeah. It's like that's the explicit message of the film.
Yeah.
Is that sharks are monsters.
Yeah.
And that killing them saves lives.
Yeah.
And it's like not even. I did say that Jaws is kind of an outlier. Mr. Jaws is kind of an
Mr.
outlier.
Jaws, yeah.
But we also get that story from Quint talking, the USS Indianapolis. Right. So it's like all those sharks are also big bad killers. And even Hooper, who's like loves sharks, has stories about being attacked and injured by them, And then like we see Brody flipping through that book and it's like these sharks are scary.
Yeah.
So it's like,
look at them being carnivorous. How dare they?
And when they do kill that other shark, that tiger shark, that poor innocent tiger shark.
I know, it didn't do nothing to nobody.
Like the only reason Brody and Hooper care that shark got killed was because like it's not the right shark.
Yeah.
But nobody's like, oh, but that was a poor innocent animal. Why
Yeah.
did we just kill this animal for no reason? It's just sort of like, well, there's no innocent shark just because it's not the shark we're looking for. It's that shark probably would have killed somebody eventually, you know, it just hadn't got around to it. So it's just like, so Jaws just literally
vilifying sharks.
And it's like why we still have, a lot of people have brought up like the sharks in Finding Nemo are sort of like still how we view sharks, you know, and like the sharks, we get little glimpse of that shark in them, like Little Mermaid. And it's just sort of like, sharks are just here to be little menaces for a moment and to kill and destroy and stuff to an extent that like no other animal is.
Yeah.
Especially not animals in the water, which you're wrong. They're all murderers. No,
they're all awful. Right, but like if we're thinking about what a shark does, like what role it serves in its ecosystem, like it is not far off from that of like a big cat.
It's just like, like it's an apex predator or whatever.
But like big cats are furry and still kind of cute.
That is, people also talk about the Bambi effect.
Right.
Which is that people started caring about, you know, hunting against cute animals.
Yeah.
But they still don't care about ugly animals.
Yeah, that like a shark is so different from a human. There's like that it's so hard for us to see or put humanity into the shark.
With its dull eyes and
like a doll's eyes. Love it so much. That therefore it like is everything that humanity isn't, and of course humanity is like,
because we have to have a dichotomy.
Yeah,
it has to be an either or.
But of course, like being human means
the best ever.
Yeah, and like
Super
is the most
good.
fair and
rational.
Yeah,
and it's also like it created this idea of like a rogue shark who like just gets a taste for human. Like there's this like this myth about sharks that like once they get a taste for humans, like you've probably heard that, like once they get a taste of human blood, they'll like crave it and want to go. It's like that's not true.
No.
At all. Like they aren't like serial killers or something. And it's just sort of like, like why do we view the shark as being in the wrong in a way that we don't like just the ocean in general? I mean, coming from a place of being afraid of the ocean. There are so many dangers in the ocean. Like a fucking riptide. We don't like put that on a riptide.
Yeah.
We're not like, oh, it's a malicious, evil riptide. You know what I mean? Or like,
well, and also like, wasn't this movie like kind of, that like before the average American citizen, like just the American population doesn't know fuck all about sharks.
Well, yeah. And like, this is really like why it was so easy, I think, to make this new conception about sharks. Like, it was interesting, one YouTube video, I'll link it in the show notes, this YouTube video that had a really good like historical overview of it. It really talks about how before the 19th century, it was really talked about as like shark accidents. Or like an incident with a shark, or like something like you would maybe talk about like a boating accident, or like somebody drowned or something. It was tragic and it was bad, but it was just sort of like something that happened. Yeah. We didn't really start calling them shark attacks until later.
That's interesting.
And I think one of the reasons why we started calling them shark attacks, and like there's something very like I said, quantifiable about the Jaws effect, where it actually changed like policy decisions, where sharks were named like waste fish, so people were allowed to like hunt them as much as they wanted to, and you didn't need to keep track of how much you were hunting because like it didn't matter, you know. And they really, this whole species declined, and it reached a low point in like the 90s, I think. And I'm pretty sure it's come back up. Yeah, it's definitely come back up since then. You know, it's turned around so much because now we actually have some laws protecting sharks and other marine animals.
Hopefully are under. Well, and I think for even now, our understanding of the ocean.
Right, yeah, that is just
pretty poor.
Yeah, because there's just so much to know.
Yeah,
and like I said about how the fish in the ocean seem so innumerable. There are just so many fish in the ocean, and the ocean is so big and vast. Yeah, but we don't actually know the lifespan of these fish, or like how long it'll take for them to come back. And like sharks live such long; they live about the same lifespan as humans. Yeah. So each time like when you kill a shark, that tends to actually be a really young shark, and then like. Can't really reproduce
that quickly,
Yeah. This apparently the size that Mr. Jaws is would make them a very old shark. I don't know. And it's just like so much of this stuff got put on Shark, and like Shark Week. We haven't even mentioned Shark Week.
Oh my gosh,
which is all about making sharks seem terrifying and like, monstrous, and in like a way that no other documentary project, like you don't watch March of the Penguins and it's like even like predators in documentaries are like, oh, will this predator get a meal tonight or will it not?
Yeah.
You know?
Actually, I remember watching a documentary about like salmon migration in college. And by the end of that, documentary, I was rooting so hard for the bear.
Yeah.
Because, like, you see all of these salmon.
You're like, just get one salmon,
Yeah,
bear.
and then, like, the documentary is, like, telling me about this bear that hasn't eaten meat in 9 months.
Yeah,
and
he's hungry.
And, like, she just has 2 cubs, and she's got like, are
she's
you
a
kidding?
working
I was like,
mother.
oh my God, get some fish, girl.
Yeah.
Like, I am rooting for the bear right now.
Yeah, and we, like, do not have that for sure. Even though, like, fear of getting attacked by a shark seems so comparable to me to the fear of, like, going hiking and getting attacked by a bear.
Right.
And yet we put none of that, like, maliciousness onto bears. No. We can even have cute bear mascots to help us prevent forest fires. Yeah, I know you're a big bear, but like you said, like wildcats or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like we put all this negative stuff on sharks, and like so many every shark expert agrees that sharks, I mean, not that we need to not that sharks need to be perfect angels for us to care about them and not want them to die when it's like we're the ones. Oh, what I was going to say, but I distracted my own self, is that when it started changing to being talked about shark attacks,
Yes.
it's always because moments where there was an increase of human activity in the shark's natural habitat.
Exactly.
And the shark's like, what the fuck is this?
are you doing,
What is
man?
going on here?
Yeah.
And like when canals are being built or something like that, suddenly there will be shark attacks.
Like, what are you
and
doing?
often they get attributed to a single shark. And it's like, probably not. Probably you just are in a shark habitat, and so sharks are being like, oh shit, what's that? Oh God, bite.
And and we don't and sharks are so different from humans that like we don't have the like awareness to differentiate one shark from another that would to us look identical.
And and so like experts who like know sharks talk about how like sharks are, not that we need to make them perfect baby angels.
Yeah.
Like they're pretty calm animals. I mean, in an odd way, a lot of like those apex predators are, because they don't really have to worry about shit a lot. Yeah, they don't have to be as aggressive. Like sharks aren't overtly aggressive animals. No. Like if you annoy them or you get in their way or something, they could attack you. But like more often than not, they're gonna just want to get away from you.
Yeah,
because they don't know what the fuck you are.
Yeah,
and they're like, oh, I don't know about that. Like they aren't vicious, and like I guess they're also actually kind of like curious.
Yeah.
So a lot of experts have seen them like interacting safely with humans. First off, often sharks can interact safely with humans, and also like kind of being playful with other aquatic life and like playing with dolphins and stuff. Like they're really cute. And like they only eat, like a lot of shark species eat like once or twice a week.
Right.
So it's like most of the time they don't even have food on their minds. They're just hanging out, man. They're not hungry. Like that's not even on their mind. And like shark attacks are like even like fatal ones, but also just like non-fatal shark attacks are incredibly rare.
They're so rare.
Just like other, I mean, really, bear attacks are pretty fucking rare.
Yeah.
You know, and when they do happen, it's because some human wandered into like a natural world, you know, and it's like, especially for the amount of like fear and anxiety we put on shark attacks, the amount of like how rare they are is like wild.
Yeah.
And like when they do bite a human, it's because they thought you were a fucking seal or like something.
Yeah.
You know, they got confused.
Yeah, like
they made an honest mistake.
You're on their turf, man.
Yeah, and they didn't mean to do it, and like they don't want to eat humans. Often that's why when sharks bite you, like people survive because they'll take one bite and be like, oh, gross. There's not enough blubber on this.
Yeah,
there's the fat.
I thought this was a seal.
It's just a bunch of bone.
Yeah.
So yeah, it really is just animals behaving as animals in their ecosystem. So it's really fucked up that Jaws changed how we view sharks and made them into something evil.
Yeah, kind of for the worse. Yeah.
And interestingly, Peter Benchley.
Yeah.
I think Spielberg maybe has talked about this a little bit too, from what I remember. But Peter Benchley in particular, who wrote the novel, later actually became like a big deal advocate for shark conservation.
Aww.
And like put a lot of the money he got from the novel into shark conservation.
Like
and
actually sharks are legit, you guys.
He's quoted as saying, the shark in an updated Jaws could not be the villain. It would have to be written as the victim, for worldwide, sharks are much more the oppressed than the oppressors. I'm like, oh, that is growth.
Yeah.
Thank you, Peter Benchley. Yeah. So, and it really has improved since then, as a lot of, because we've done a lot for marine life in general, which has made a difference. And a lot of sharks that get killed now, like I think the worst threat for sharks right now is actually them accidentally getting taken up in like other big fishing nets or whatever, where they're trying to get other types of fish and they just accidentally get the shark. But still it is this view of sharks where they're like, oh well, it was just a shark. You can kill whatever sharks you want. But yeah, it fucks up the whole ecosystem. And they don't deserve it. They did nothing wrong. Mr. Jaws did nothing wrong, even if he is an axe murderer.
Yeah, again, I'm just going back to man versus nature. It's like almost as if like nature has this like homeostasis.
Yeah.
That it will just like naturally revert to.
Yeah.
And then like it's humans that are just like always
trying to
fucking
fight
it up.
against that homeostasis.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you just let it be, it would be better for all of us.
Yeah.
Just let Mr. Jaws eat a few
Close the-
bathers.
Close the beach. Or close the beach.
Or just close the beach and
Yeah.
let the shit. Yeah. Yeah.
Bathers.
Let's do a quick game.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we don't have enough people to do archetypes.
No.
But you thought it would be fun since we have Quint, Hooper, and Brody.
Right.
And there are lots of iconic sets of 3.
A trio, yeah.
Trios.
Yeah.
We could just sort of like split them up into who's who.
I love it. Can we start with the Powerpuff Girls?
Yeah, let's do the Powerpuff Girls.
So we've got the Powerpuff Girls, we've got Blossom, Bubbles, and Buttercup.
Yeah.
So I think obviously Quint is Buttercup.
Yeah.
Right? Kind of cranky.
Kind of grizzled.
Grizzled, yeah, cranky.
As much as a Powerpuff Girl can be grizzled.
But who's Bubbles?
Yeah.
Who's the lighter, happier, happy-go-lucky
I mean,
one?
Hooper is pretty light and happy-go-lucky.
I suppose. And then that would make... So to me, Blossom is kind of the leader of the group. And I feel like even though Brody kind of is a de facto leader in this group, even though he's kind of not.
Well, I also feel like Blossom is the everyman of the Powerpuff Girls. 'Cause
Sure.
we have, like, Buttercup, who's very, identifiable for her, like, toughness.
Yes, yeah.
And Bubbles, who's very identifiable for being, like, light and happy and
Yeah.
kind of maybe the dumb blonde,
Well-
but, like, cute. And it's like, what is Blossom known for?
Right, because Blossom is the sugar,
Yeah.
Buttercup is the spice,
Yeah.
and Bubbles is the everything nice.
Yeah. 3-course meal.
A 3-course meal. So that would be appetizer, dinner, and dessert.
Oh.
Right?
Hooper is the dessert.
Okay.
It's his hair. I don't know. It seems fluffy. Mrs. Brody would agree with me. I feel like Brody can't be more than an appetizer. There's just not enough of him there.
But that would make Quint the
I mean,
entree.
If it's like a steak.
That's true. I don't know, maybe even like liver and onions or something.
I mean,
Ooh,
you don't see him being the dessert.
No, definitely not.
No.
Yeah, he could be the entree. Yeah, if the entree is like a steak, for sure. Yeah. And then what's the appetizer? Like a salad or
A fucking salad. A soup or a salad.
a soup? Yeah, for sure.
Like
a
a
soup.
gazpacho.
Yeah. What about the flavors of Neapolitan ice cream?
Ooh.
Chocolate, vanilla, strawberry.
Okay, Brody's got to be the vanilla.
Yeah, he's so boring.
As somebody who loves vanilla the most out of those flavors, I love a vanilla ice cream.
Yeah.
But like, it's gotta be Brody.
Yeah.
I could not see Clint as strawberry.
He's chocolate.
He's gotta be chocolate.
Yeah, and I think Hooper is strawberry.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
for
think
sure.
that's it. I think that's it.
I love
Okay.
this.
So this has been Deep Thoughts, Shallow Plots.
Make sure to join us next month. We'll be covering Pan's Labyrinth. So thanks as always to Sound Guy Matt.
Yeah, for setting us up in a
Always.
new location.
Follow us on Instagram. And until next time, we've got a panic on our hands on the 4th of July.